Liberty lovers. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the executive director of the People for Liberty, and you are watching our Pot O' Gold. It's loosely a St. Patrick's Day celebration, but we had to throw in the pot part because the fundamental story, right? The origin story of humanity is prohibition. And if we're going to talk about prohibition, I want to bring in my favorite co-host, my only co-host, the princess with, I don't know what rhymes with princess. I can say the hostess with the mostest, but the princess with, I don't know.
Piss test. Fuck, I don't know either.
Princess, thank you very much. Let's talk quickly about how humanity's origin story is one of prohibition, right? Our oldest story is Adam and Eve.
Yep.
And Eve gets the message, right? Do not eat from this tree. But
Absolutely.
they make it tempting already, right? It's called the tree of knowledge. And they're like, don't eat from the tree of knowledge because then you'll have the curse of knowledge.
Living in America, I don't think she actually ate from that tree of knowledge, just based on the people I've interacted with. But you're right. Prohibition is, humans love it for some reason, and we always do it. But that's why your diets don't work, because you tell yourself you can't have a donut, and then you eat 1,000 donuts later. So it ruins your diet. It ruins your country. It ruins the economy because they take all your taxes and shove it down these frivolous wars on morality. And 2 stars, would not recommend.
I agree with you 100%. And we're lucky to have for our first guest, the 2020 presidential candidate, the only one who spoke out against prohibition in all its stages. And of course, that's not Joe Biden. That's not Donald Trump. That is our first guest today, Joe Jorgensen. Dr. Jorgensen, thank you so much for being here to talk with us on our Pot of Gold broadcast.
Oh, so glad to be here. And absolutely, I spoke out against it. And not just marijuana, everything.
Right. And so that's one of the critical things that people don't realize is that when we talk about prohibition, and of course, we're talking about it in sort of a St. Patrick's Day, and everybody knows that at one point in time, America codified prohibition by putting it into the Constitution. But prohibition is actually not really about drugs. It's about power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about that aspect of it, the power aspect of it, it's a natural topic for libertarians to talk about. How were you able to talk about that when you were campaigning?
Well, I tried to talk about it everywhere I went. And of course, what made it easier is now marijuana is on the ballot in many states. And so that just opened up the door. And I look at the difference between now and 1996. In 1996, people were thinking it would never happen. And now it looks like it is. So we'll see how it goes. And by the way, it's not just even marijuana. For instance, the city I live in, southern, very conservative southern city, had alcohol sales outlawed on Sunday.
Wow.
And then they decide, yes, and this wasn't that long ago. And so then they decided to legalize alcohol on Sunday. And by the way, I think it's only legal in restaurants. I still don't think you can go to the store and buy it. So somebody wrote a letter to the editor saying, mark my word, within the next year, there's going to be murder on the streets. There's going to be murder downtown. You wait. And that was just too easy of a hit, hit to take. Right. So, because I was thinking this would be really easy to copy down this name and reply in a year asking where all the dead bodies are. So, but the one question that people, or the one thing that people think is, okay, if it's illegal, everybody's going to do it. And I've heard that a lot on radio shows. And I will say to the interviewer, well, alcohol's legal. You don't look drunk to me. Neither does your sound guy or the camera guy. So, and you know what? When I walked up to the studio, it's been so long, we've been doing so much remote, yeah. But I did do some in person. As I was walking up to the studio, didn't see any people lying in the street, either murdered or drunk.
Right. that's one of my favorite examples is during one of the Republican debates, they asked Ron Paul, they said, Dr. Paul, you're famous for having proposed a bill to deschedule marijuana. And what was interesting about it actually is that he proposed it with the most liberal member of the House, whose name eludes me right now, from Cleveland. It'll come to me. But it was, Ron Paul and a super liberal guy proposing legalizing. And they said, Dr. Paul, don't you think you're running in the wrong party if you want to decriminalize marijuana, or you want to decriminalize all drugs, including heroin? And he said, well, we're here in South Carolina. It was the presidential debate in South Carolina. Here in South Carolina, pretty conservative crowd. Let me get a show of hands. How many people will go out and buy heroin if we decriminalize it tomorrow? Nobody raises their hand.
By the way, the conservative crowd you just mentioned too, that forum, the venue where they had that debate was within walking distance of my house. It's like 4 or 5 blocks away. So yes, very conservative crowd.
And so that's sort of the interesting thing about prohibition is that nobody thinks about prohibition in terms of, what's going to happen? What are the consequences of, people being given independence? They think about all the terrible things that could happen if this thing is abused or that thing is abused. And honestly, prohibition isn't just about drugs either, right? There's all sorts of other things that we're prohibited from buying, from owning. One of my favorite examples is in Massachusetts, it's illegal to own a wrist rocket, which is, a very complicated, powerful slingshot. I don't know why. I can't explain it. In Texas, it's a required part of growing up.
Right.
Can you knock the cans off the fence with the wrist rocket? Don't shoot animals. Don't be mean, stuff like that. But prohibition is such a larger issue that, we're calling our thing pot of gold. We're talking about prohibition, but really it comes down to our core issue of what is the government supposed to be doing for us?
Absolutely. And I teach social psychology at Clemson University, and I teach something called reactance theory. And one of my favorite examples, the example that I use in class, if you will recall the Parents Music Resource Council, does that sound familiar with Tipper Gore? So we had Snyder.
Dee Snyder from Twisted Sister.
Yes. And he is what they wanted to do is I wanted to ban the CDs. For those of you young people, they were round discs that you had to put into a CD player because didn't have iPods at the time, or phones, or iPhones and everything else. But anyway, so they wanted to ban the music. And Dee Snyder is out there saying, no, this is America, free speech. And by the way, it was kind of funny. You've got Dee Snyder, if you don't know what he looks like, heavy, heavy makeup, including purple eyeshadow and long, untamed hair. And there he is talking before Congress, right? Saying, no, the people should be able to listen to what they want. So they had a compromise in which they put a little sticker, which I think they still have them, advisory. And it says, bad language, sex, drugs, whatever contained in this. So kind of like the ratings for movies, right? So when they put the little stickers on the CDs, what happened? The sales of the stickered CDs went up because kids are told, oh, you can't have this. So what does that make them want to do? It makes them want to have it. And it's reactance theory, and it's well studied in psychology.
Yeah, well, so that's really important too, because again, that's one of the critical things about prohibition that we don't think about, is that there's been music prohibition, there's been movie prohibition. Now, Princess, you are a different generation than me and Joe. Do you recall bans on music or movies, anything like that in popular culture in your lifetime? Is there anything you think about?
I think a lot of books got banned, like The Grapes of Wrath got banned at my school because it said the N-word.
Wow.
But yeah,
that's a great example. Yeah, because book banning is another example of prohibition.
And they're doing it now. And they're doing it now.
What? So is there a big one that's being banned right now? I mean, Grapes of Wrath is astonishing to me because I love Steinbeck. It's one of my favorite books, and it's a critical story of American history. But
I
I
went
know
to
that they
public school,
banned.
Dan, so we don't
They
teach it
banned.
anymore.
Go ahead, Princess.
Take a drink. I was just saying, I went to government public school, so education is not like their top priority there.
Well, it is education, but they
Is
only
it?
want to educate you on
No,
what
it's
they want.
indoctrination.
You're right. You're right.
They're teaching you how to be a good little employee and how to go to work and do all the things that you don't want to do, and do them well for your boss, so your boss can make money and you can make money off of your boss, and then the cycle continues, and then you die and your children go and take your place.
Princess, you make an excellent example about education. And I know we're talking about drugs mainly, not education. But if you look at education, why did it become public education? We were doing fine without it being public. And education has only gone downhill since the government took control. So here's a supposed problem that government's going to fix. But again, we know it's for power. It has nothing to do with let's help the poor people. In fact, if you don't mind, I think this is a great time to give another Ron Paul example, which he was talking about how Congress wanted to pass a bill to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a Rosa Parks statue. And Ron Paul voted against it, but he said, of course, I'm a huge fan of Rosa Parks. But you know what? How about everybody sitting around the table? Let's just chip in money and buy the statue ourselves. There's no reason we need to increase the deficit. There's no reason we need to have the average person chip in money. Let's just, like he takes out his wallet. I'll be the first one to chip in. Not one single person wanted to do it. Of course, what they want to do is they want to spend other people's money to get what they want, just like they want to pass laws to get other people to do what they want.
The thing about other people's money is it's endless, like that's the best part about it. And you don't have to feel the hurt of buying something stupid you don't need, like a statue. And instead of spending that money on a Rosa Parks statue, why not update the textbooks about Rosa Parks instead of giving our students across this country 8-year-old textbooks and expecting them to know stuff about what's happening today? And we aren't. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, and update them to put in the textbooks that was a government-run bus, government-owned bus that was discriminating against her, because only government has the power to discriminate like that. Excuse me. That's another thing that I would point out on the campaign trail every chance I got, which is, what if Uber or Lyft discriminated against their best customers? Because at the time, Blacks made up 60% of the bus ridership. What if Uber did that? They would go out of business in a heartbeat, as well they should, discriminating against people like that. But the government has the power to do it, and so they wield it.
And in fact, that is what happened, right? They organized the bus boycott, and the buses were going out of business. People cooperating together voluntarily showed that, that sort of prohibition. And that was a prohibition, right? You were prohibited from sitting in the front of the bus. You were prohibited from going from drinking from the, it's offensive to even say it, but from the whites only drinking fountain, right? People were prohibited, and it worked both ways too. White people couldn't go into the black section.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because for a while, Clemson had a subsidy from the government, which I took advantage of, and because I live about 45 minutes from Clemson. So I would ride the subsidized bus to go to class, so I didn't have to, spend all the money on gas. And I always sat on the back of the bus where I could kind of spread out my work and do work, because not only am I saving money, now I'm getting free time. Instead of commuting, I can actually get my work done.
Yeah. And those sort of things, that's another example of prohibition. So we're definitely talking about the broad system. We're talking about prohibition. Now, as we get into the specifics, Princess, I
Oh,
want to
and
talk.
I'm sorry, Dan.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but do you mind if I just put a little neat bow
Please do.
on that
Please
last thing we were talking about? Because we were talking about blacks being prohibited from the front of the bus, and you brought up, yes, whites are also prohibited from the back of the bus. Notice how much better, one thing that we libertarians do, and me too, is we tend to focus on what's wrong, what the government does wrong. And we also need to instead show what can replace it with something better. So think about how the free market can solve that problem about where people want to sit on the bus. Just like, now where we are now, nobody would even think of doing that, but it's not thanks to government, it's thanks to people. But the free market can better decide where people want to sit on the bus. And maybe you can charge more for one, or maybe when the bus is busy, you have higher fares or whatever. But the free market is such a much better way to resolve problems. It's such a much better way to give each person what he or she wants, no matter what the race, no matter what the gender.
I see you nodding along, Princess.
Because it's not Jesus, but asking you shall receive. I love the free market. It solves every problem. And I am one of those libertarians who stubs their toe and is save me, free hand to the market, because that's true. It's how it works. People aren't going to do what they don't want to do unless they're forced to by these red tapes and restrictions. So just one, who wants to sit at the front? We've all been kids. You go to the back first. One, because if you get hit head on, you're going to be the first to die in the front. So always sit in the back. But also the cool kids are in the back. So it's not an issue, really.
I agree with that completely. I think, one of the interesting things about talking about, what the cool kids are doing and the market influence is that it shows you so clearly how government prohibition, right? And prohibition is always enforced by government. Government prohibition is designed to separate people, to keep them apart from each other. So
divide and conquer.
Exactly. So I wanted to go to one of the quick questions, Joe. We have some questions coming in on the board for you. And one was, would you consider the South Carolina's governor's race? Because you were just talking about how you're in South Carolina in 2022 or some other race besides president.
2022 might be a bit soon
It's
to the
right
last
around the
race.
corner.
I got to tell you, while I had so much more fun than I ever imagined possible running for president, it was also a heck of a lot more work than I ever thought possible. So I might need a break in 2022. But that doesn't mean I'm not active. In fact, I've mentioned that we are starting an organization and we now have a treasurer. So we're planning on filing paperwork. So I am going to keep the message going, but just maybe from a different standpoint.
Sure. I mean, I think that most people in the liberty movement know it's important to find your home, the place that, resonates with you, because we've got a myriad of different movements and different homes, that sort of thing. So if we were to come back to cannabis, and you talked about the fact that marijuana has done pretty well on the ballot every time it's been there. Do you think you see a day when cannabis, we won't talk about all drugs, but cannabis will be legal everywhere?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to thank the questioner for that question. I do appreciate it, because I appreciate the confidence in your vote for me for governor. Yes, it's inevitable. The barn door is open, right? The horses are coming out. And keep in mind, it was legal. Cocaine was legal back at the turn of the last century. So it just, things come in and out of favor. And I'd like to point out that ecstasy, or what they now call Molly, MDMA, that was legal until 1984. So it's just the whims of government. And I think at this point, the people have spoken, and even people in government are kind of stepping aside. In fact, notice the federal government isn't, hurting itself getting to these states to outlaw it.
That's a really good point, because talking about ecstasy, as my generation called it, or Molly, as it's called now. It was specifically designed in a laboratory to create a drug that would get you high, but was still legal. And we talked about the origin story of prohibition. The other origin story of mankind is the age-old battle between warhead and armor. I find something that does this, you find something that blocks that. And so we're always trying to find, Chris Rock has a great routine about it where he says, people want to get high. Okay, right? People found out that there's a toad that you can lick and you'll get high. How did somebody figure that out? Somebody was going around.
Yeah, and in fact, the state of Kentucky, great people who invited me to their state convention last week. Was it last weekend or the weekend before?
Last weekend. You guys did that whole bourbon
it was last weekend. We took a tour of a distillery, and the owner was talking about how animals also prefer to get drunk. And he was talking about a buck who had found its way to, he thought the buck was just thirsty, but no, he was stumbling, coming back for more. So even animals have that desire to escape.
It's a fascinating thing. So, we talk about, escape, but there's also, there's another form of prohibition that involves drugs that isn't about drugs that get you high. It's medical treatment, right? Right now in the United States, you can't seek the medical treatment that you want sometimes because there's a prohibition on experimental meds. And so let me just say something and see if I get struck down by lightning. The president did one good thing, right? He might
wait, which president?
The president, Donald Trump, the ex-president, did one thing where he passed the right to try. And essentially, if you had a doctor who said, this person is going to die, you could take any med that you wanted to. And that was a really good thing. I can tell you, I have a son of a friend who there was a drug that was going to save his life in clinical trials. And through that, they were able to get it, and it saved his life. It saved his son's life. And that's a good thing. It's crazy that it takes an authoritarian executive order from the most authoritarian president to make it so that people can try to save their lives.
Well, and even crazier is, why do people think they have the right to keep you from trying to save your own life? Where is the morality there? And Dan, this might be a great segue for what you were telling me last week about your thoughts about right to healthcare.
Well, it's funny. I think I'll go through it quickly. People who watch our Liberty Lunch saw me talking with Dan Berman. But Dan Berman changed my mind. I used to always say people don't have a right to healthcare because healthcare is provided by a healthcare provider, and you don't have a right to somebody else's labor. We fought a war about that in this country. Nobody has to work for you. And he's like, "Well, I disagree."
We still have slaves, Dan.
Well, yeah, we have wage slaves. We have all sorts of things, but nobody has a right to your labor. It's not defined anymore, as opposed to what we'd had before. But Dan Berman said, no, he's like, no, you have a right to seek the healthcare that you want. You do have a right to healthcare. Nobody has to provide it, but you have a right to seek the healthcare that you want. And so for me, that was a revelation, and I think a great statement about libertarianism, because here am I, I've been active in the Libertarian Party for a long time and had what I thought was an entrenched position. And in 1 minute of conversation, I was shown the light.
Yep. And that's one of the great things about libertarians, by the way, is we do tend to talk a little bit more philosophically. We're an idea party, but talking about the medical area, I'm not sure if I should mention the author's name, but there was a fairly well-known author who had AIDS in the 90s. And the only thing that could keep him, that could keep his food down was smoking marijuana. Now, yes, they had synthetic stuff at the time, but that didn't work. It wasn't as good as it is now. They didn't have medications. So the only way he could keep himself alive was to smoke pot. He got arrested, and, basically it was the state that killed him. It's like, if the only way for you to keep food down is this plant, seriously, you're going to keep somebody from access to this plant that's going to help you eat food? Right. I don't understand why people even think they have the right to do that.
Right. It's completely insane that people, and the worst is that there are people who die because they believe in the prohibition and they're like, oh, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to break the law to save my own life. We've been so conditioned towards subservience of putting ourselves second to government. And that's the thing that libertarians want. We want to set people free for themselves, not for any other reason, for yourself. Your birthright is freedom. You know, we're running up on the end of your time with us, Joe, and I want to be very
okay. I didn't realize that.
Well, we have like 10 more minutes, but I want to.
Okay, because I did want to make another point too.
Please make your other point.
Okay, because we've been speaking mostly from the standpoint of our rights, what we have the right to do. And libertarians love talking about that. However, I think in order to win the hearts and minds of Americans, we have to show them how our way is better. They may say, well, okay, maybe maybe it is your body, but we just can't have people running amok. So they need to so we need to show how not only is it philosophically better, but it's practically better, that this is the best solution practically. And I was on a podcast during the presidential campaign, and the podcast host, someone who leans right, said, well, okay, I'm with you on the pot. Okay, we can legalize that, but I'm totally against meth. I mean, look, you've got meth houses. I don't want a meth house next door to me. And what about the kids running around and it's toxic? Some people have bought meth houses and it turns out they're poisonous. And I said, well, that's the reason we need to legalize it, not make it illegal. How often do we hear of somebody making bathtub gin? People used to die. There was a criminal element involved. Al Capone made lots of money because we put alcohol in the criminal element, and people were literally making bathtub gin. So now meth is illegal. So we've got something called meth houses. Wouldn't you much rather have Philip Morris or Seagram's or some other company make meth safely somewhere than to possibly have a meth house next door? And also, if you look at the profit, when's the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going around trying to push gin on high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into your house to support a vodka habit? We don't have those problems because they're legal. Because if you're a liquor store owner, you're not going to risk everything to for a very small profit, but because drugs are illegal, there's a huge profit motive in there. So now there's a reason for somebody, not a good reason, don't get me wrong, right. But now there's, let's say, motivation. There's motivation for somebody to enter the criminal market and push, notice what they call it, pushing drugs on students. And many students have said that, it's much easier to find pot and other drugs, even before pot was legal, that you would see that more often in schools than the liquor.
And I think you raise a wonderful point that the creation of the black market is still a market. Okay. And there are people who are going to be working very, very hard to fulfill the needs of the market. I had a good friend who used to make a living driving Uber in Boston, but then Massachusetts banned vaping, but it has legal cannabis, and New Hampshire allows vaping, but no cannabis. And so he had this little round trip that he could make where he would buy cannabis in Massachusetts, drive across the border to New Hampshire, and he was just going Walmart to Walmart parking lot, posting on Facebook, I'll be at the Walmart parking lot, blah, blah, blah. He would sell what he had. He'd pick up vaping materials, go back down to Massachusetts, sell them there, made a tremendous amount of money. You might argue that the government made him rich, but that's not the purpose of government. The government is not supposed to do that through prohibition. And it really is a sad experience.
And you're so right about the free market. There was one time my husband and I were walking through a not as nice neighborhood, and there was a guy yelling at us from across the street saying, hey, anything I can help you with? And I'm like, no, we're good. And he's like, you sure? Yeah, I'm fine. And my husband said, do you know him? Like, what? And I said, no, I think perhaps he was a drug dealer and just trying to give us excellent customer service, probably wondering why we were there. So people do have speaking from psychology, people do like to accomplish things. They do like to make a difference. And so if the government's going to prohibit that on the surface, then people will go underground. And yes, people even, there is a real market where people try to give you better service. And funny how even the drug dealers try to give us better service than people in government. Isn't it funny? Oh, I
Dan,
can't
you're muted.
Everybody drink.
Oh, I couldn't hear you, Dan.
No, I had muted myself earlier. So we're coming, and Princess and I have a ritual when we do shows that if one of us starts talking and we're muted, we generally take a drink. So we appreciate you hitting the water or what happened to be in your bottle there and following along with our thing. So, people want to know, it's another question from the field. This will be our last question to you.
Okay.
What can people do locally right now? How do they make a difference in either talking about prohibition or just enhancing liberty in general?
Well, I think, first of all, just talking with friends and family is a good place to start, because a lot of times we look at, let me run for president and change the world. But it's really changing minds one at a time. Of course, social media is a great way. And again, one thing that libertarians have traditionally done that I don't think works as well is they talk about, it's my body, it's my right, and I should have the right to do that. How about flipping it around and showing people how it's going to help them? What's in it for them? Basically, be a salesperson.
That is just a phenomenal answer. I say all the time that we are really in the business of customer acquisition. We're trying to find people who want to buy liberty, and we just have to figure out how to sell it. And so one of the greatest salesmen for liberty, salespeople for liberty in my lifetime, Dr. Joe Jorgensen, thank you so much for being with us on the Pot of Gold broadcast. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Dan. That means so much to me coming from you, because you have done so much to advance the party. I really appreciate all your dedication, your hard work and dedication.
That is very kind. Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. We are moving on to the next show. I tell you what, this is just astonishing to me that, we already started off at this incredibly high level. That was a great discussion.
I love hearing her speak. She's so poised and eloquent, and the campaign, like any political campaign, was rough, but she handled that with a level of grace that I'm sure I speak for everyone I say we are forever grateful for.
That's the critical word. The very first time I met Joe, I thought that's grace in action, because there's so much stuff that gets thrown at you, right? There are some people who want you to look bad when you're in the public eye. And she was a person that no matter what happened, just was always amazing. And so I'm also very grateful. And we have this great, our comment thread is filled with comments of people who are excited about Joe, which is just awesome. Tell us about our next guest, Sarah. First, take a drink.
Cheers. Cheers. How else am I going to get drunk during these? Okay. It's my only chance to day drink. Wink, wink. But I'm super excited to introduce Matt Mears. He's the vice chair of the Psychedelic Caucus. And when we think about prohibition, we often talk about weed that gets the highlight, but there's so many other drugs that are just as helpful and medicinal and spiritual for people that they should be able to have access to. So I'm really excited to bring him on.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the broadcast. Matt, you want us to call you Matt, Matthew? What would you prefer? Mears? You got to drink.
Shot. Take
muted.
A shot. You're muted too. Take a shot.
Dang. All right.
Just for the reference, for the shots, I will be doing the Knob Creek Straight Rye Whiskey.
God dang.
And then later on during the day, I brought my. They're not going to show up very well.
No, green screen. Those are your edibles?
Yeah, these are my edibles. Those are for later. All right, so we're going to call you. You said Matt.
I always say it depends on how mad you are at me. Usually, my wife calls me Matthew when she's pissed off, so I always make that joke.
And I imagine
I don't really have a preference.
I imagine it's a point in your childhood where Matthew Mears, you get over here right now.
And that just sent chills up my spine. I know that feeling well.
All right,
guys. I wanted to tell you on the front end. Originally, I thought I was doing a presentation on the drug war, so I did make like a 10 to 12. Hey, there's Caleb. I did make a 10 to 12 minute presentation that I can read, or we can just talk and I can pull information from it. It's your call.
I would love to hear your presentation.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I titled it, Why the American People Should Demand an Immediate End to the Prohibition on Ingestible Substances. Before we get started, they already said my name. It's Matthew Mears. I'm a husband, soon to be a father. We've got a baby on the way, and we're really excited about that. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As far as being a libertarian, I'm still fairly unknown, I feel like. I was a campaign manager, managed the Ricky Dale Harrington Jr. campaign here in Arkansas against Tom.
Wow, that was a great campaign. You guys did an amazing job.
Thank you.
When I saw him on television in the debate that Tom Cotton refused to come to, I was stunned.
Yeah.
Great campaign, great candidacy.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, Matt.
No, it's fine. Actually, it may be better for me to just go through this and you guys just hop in as you see fit.
You can't stop us from doing that.
But that campaign was amazing. We set the record for the most successful two-way federal race in the party's history. So that was amazing to get to work with that team. It was a blast. I'm also the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus Region 7 coordinator. And then, like you said earlier, the vice chair for the Psychedelic Caucus. Both the Mises Caucus and the Psychedelic Caucus take a hardline stance against the drug war and call for its immediate end. The phrase, the war on drugs, is something I think personally we need to talk about renaming. It's something that I have been thinking about for a while, but it perfectly highlights the federal government's bend towards Orwellian doublespeak. You see this in things like the Patriot Act, which is anything but that. The drug war is not a drug war, is not a war against drugs. It is a war against the American people for the resource of drugs. And we're not ever even really going to be able to know the downstream effects because we know all the direct effects. We can count every time somebody kicks in a door and, hauls a father away from their family. But we don't know, or we don't keep track, and we can't count the times one of his sons who grew up without a father turns to crime later in life, and whether or not that was associated. So we can truly never even know how bad this war is. I'd like to drop a quote that goes, "When you actually study the beginnings of the federal war on drugs, you uncover a history of lies, bigotry, and ignorance so extensive it will leave you speechless." And that's Dr. Ron Paul. Thankfully, he was not speechless. We were blessed to have him as long as we did. And like he said, the origins of the drug war are very much rooted in bigotry. The first drug legislation that came about was in 1909. That was the Opium Exchange Act. It banned smokable opium, which was popular with Chinese immigrants, but not the medicinal form that most white Americans had in their cabinets. And then shortly after that, in 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act came about. And the proponents of that, that was targeted at cocaine, and the proponents of that used articles talking about black cocaine fiends, and they attributed to them ridiculous capabilities. They were impervious to bullets and super aggressive and 10 times stronger, all things that are provably false.
But see, that makes me think I want to go get some cocaine right now.
Well, I don't know about all that.
I got some real heavy logs. I got some real heavy logs that I was going to get the tractor to pull. But if I can just take some cocaine and haul those logs
around them, man, pull them out.
Exactly.
one of the most shocking things about the drug war is a quote from one man, to me, in my opinion. It was a Nixon aide who, long after Nixon had come and gone, admitted basically to inciting the drug war for political gain. And I've got the quote here. It says, "You want to know what this is all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, you could disrupt their communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." So
Terrible.
That's a great quote.
These are human beings that are having their rights stripped away for political gain and personal preference. It's a disgusting system.
Very on brand for the government, though, right? Like just
yeah. It's exactly what you would expect from a bloated federal government. It is complete control of the citizenry. I could dive off in some conspiracy there, but I won't do that. But it's a $50 billion expenditure every year annually in the U.S. There's 1.6 million drug arrests in 2018. That's 1.6 million people that we are slapping with criminal charges and making it harder for them to find employment, live their lives, and imprisoning them for a nonviolent crime.
Yeah, making them slaves to the state. And just because they wanted to like live their, like, think about how awful life is just in like general. Like you wake up, you go to work, and it kind of fucking sucks. And you just want one moment to just forget about all of it for a cool 45 minutes. And they're going to ruin your life for it, but then also make you a burden to the taxpayer. It takes like what, $35,000 a year to keep someone in prison. That's my money that could have been going to education and like your glorious police departments. Like think about that for a second.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. The fact that I think one of the most astounding things about the drug wars that is how many conservatives support it. It is mind-boggling to me that we have conservatives in America that will talk at face about their constitutional rights and living in the land of the free and all this, but then they'll find out that some guy got his door kicked down in the middle of the night. They shot his dog and maybe one of his damn kids or something, hauled him off because he had some drugs in his house, and they'll be like, well, you got to follow the law. And it is insane to me that the political right allows that. It doesn't mean anything to the left either, but they're a little bit better on it, you know?
The left and the right, they're just for themselves. So as long as it's not my door being kicked down and like I didn't have to worry about that, so then they don't think about it correctly. But what's important, like we got a question in the comments earlier that was on screen. If you don't do drugs, why should you care about the drug war? Well, because if they could do it to anybody, they can do it to everybody. And right now it's drugs. But what's it going to be next time that does affect you? And because you didn't say anything when you had the chance, when it wasn't as bad, now that it's come for you, you're going to be a victim to it still. So when we stand up for others, we stand up for ourselves because we're letting people in power know that under no circumstances will any infringements be tolerated, because you're not going to do that to anyone in my community, and you're certainly not going to do it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't see that question that came up on the screen, but I have a pretty direct answer for that.
Go ahead, please.
I'm gonna have to read this out. It's kind of complicated, but the reason that people who do not do drugs should want an end to the drug war is because the drug war makes selling drugs more risky, which reduces competition, which drives prices up, which makes more drug dealers want to get into the market. It makes it more lucrative to be a drug dealer. It denies drug sellers the right to physical and legal protection, causing them to take defense into their own hands and become violent, and denies them the ability to purchase insurance or storefront, so emptying their cash register is not an option because that may be all the money they have. This sets up a perfect storm for violent people to be attracted to the industry. It's by definition a high risk, high reward industry with no legal or physical protection, and it's that way by law. They are making it as attractive to violent people as possible. By ending all substance prohibition, you would greatly reduce the risk so professionals could get into the industry. You would allow drugstores to be ran and operated, bound by legal protection and legal liability, which would reduce poor quality and safety issues. And it would allow companies to be insured and backed by police from violent crime. That would make everyone's life better in society. What it would do is allow anyone who wants to get into the drug market to do so in a professional way with a storefront. And if they sell you something that poisons you because it's cut wrong or something like that, you take them to court, or your family takes them to court, instead of a drug dealer who nobody even knows where he's at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because like, if you think about why the drug war has led to violence and why there's so much black on black violence, is because when you're selling drugs, it's not like you can file an injunction against someone for selling on your corner, but you can shoot them in the head and that solves the problem, doesn't it?
Yep.
So like, it's a compound effect of the war on drugs. Like you spoke about earlier, we'll never know how far it's reached. Like we look at people's lives and we don't immediately associate it to this one policy that we have, this one law in the books that says you can't do drugs, but you look at the ripple effect of like, and it's crazy to me that it's just words on a piece of paper and it's destroying people's lives.
Yeah.
That's a critical point. Hey, Matt, tell us a little bit more about the Libertarian Psychedelic Caucus. If people want to find out more about you, where do they go?
The Libertarian Psychedelic Caucus, I just got elected, I think in December or something like that. I mean, it was fairly recently. I'm still fairly new. We do have a Facebook page up. You can go check that out. Just type in Libertarian Party Psychedelic Caucus. Should have a website up within a month or two. I'm working on that now.
Awesome.
We're having some change ups within the board, so we got to get that handled real quick. And then once that gets sorted out, we're going to be rocking and rolling.
Well, so I just want to extend to you now, when you guys get all that stuff up and ready, we want to have you back and help you promote that. We want to find a way to get people who should be in the Libertarian Psychedelic Caucus more involved in the organization, because you guys, you're doing a really important task and we really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. Hopefully by the time I come back, we want, my plan is within about 6 months, I'd like a website up, and I would like to have a good quantity of sample legislation to hand out to people who want to try to press it in their states. Things, decrim across the board, whatever it is, county level, state level, whatever you want to run. I want us to have sample legislation to hand to you.
That is awesome. It's an ideal thing. Go ahead, Princess. We got a last thing you want to say?
Well, just like, we'll see you in 6 months. Like I'm holding you to that because I'm really excited about what you're doing, but I really appreciate your time, Matt, and like great insight. I could talk for hours about the drug war and the effect it has on people, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. I had a great time. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You bet.
Of course.
Well, we look forward to having you back too. So, you know, those are critical things that he's talking about. You know, and it is, there's so many people working towards the good cause, the good outcome, and really serious stuff. But go ahead.
You know, Dan, it is serious, but like, it just shows the reach of the government and like how it's never positive. And for some reason, like the government is in the business of managing people, but every chance they get, they deny people their humanity. And it's so fucking odd. But I want to circle back to what we talked about with Joe and education. Because like, if you need another reason to hate the government, hate them for what they did to our curriculum. Because boomers always want to make fun of us for not knowing how to do anything when they're the ones that cut home ec from the curriculum. But we have our next guest, who is a fiery star from Hawaii, who's going to teach us probably the most. She's not here.
No, she's here.
Why are
she
you?
Is here. I was just
oh my
say,
God.
This is one of the people one of my favorite people. Fina, I'm going to tell. Oh, and look how smart she is. So she's set up. She's got 2 cameras going, and she only has the microphone on in one. You, my friend, are a broadcasting professional. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope so. I spent 4 years in college training to do it, so I hope I'm good at it.
That's awesome. And I just want to say that is one of the best cups I've ever seen.
Isn't it? It's very happy. I wanted to bring some positive vibes out here to you guys. If you don't know, I'm from Hawaii. I'm in Hawaii. I am the director of operations for the Hawaii Veterans Cannabis Alliance out here, and I'm a proud libertarian. I ran for office in 2020 for Hawaii State Senate District 20. So, yeah, hi.
And you ran against somebody, a relatively famous, right?
Famous by proximity. It was Tulsi Gabbard's dad.
Interesting. And as an example of how peculiar Hawaii, or at least these Hawaii politics are, right? He was in a party that you wouldn't have thought his political positions would have made him welcome in. So you were actually the candidate who was most honestly representing what they stood for.
For sure. But you know what? I'm not here today to talk politics necessarily.
All
I
right.
asked Princess when she reached out to me to be on the show. It's like, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to come on there and talk, or you want me to like do something else? She's like, I don't care. It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna show people how to roll a blunt. And that's
All right.
what
It's
I'm
a
doing
life
today.
skill. It's a life skill. Think
It is
about
a
when
life
you're gonna
skill.
need that. If there's a
Yes,
zombie
so-
apocalypse, my first person is the blunt roller. That's the first person I'm picking.
Well,
All right.
you know, I'm going to start rebranding myself, and this is one of those things that, you know, it's like one of those world's most interesting person things. It's like not your number one talent, but it can get you in the door, right? So I've got on my tray, right, I've got a couple things. I have this. Some people use this as like a burner to light your blunt once it's ready. I'm not going to use that. Obviously, it's still in the package. I don't use it.
What is it?
It's like some twill or twine.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't really mess with it, but some people like it if you want to be like not wanting to like inhale lighter fumes or whatever. But there it is. This here is a conical wrap that's used by some people. That's pretty easy for like first time rollers. So one of the things I do with the Hawaii Veterans Cannabis Alliance is we kind of like take veterans that are new out. We show them kind of like the ropes of weed, right? So this is a conical piece. And you can just, you know, pack your weed in the bottom there. And the thing I like about the conical piece is that it's easier to just assemble really quick if you're new at it, right? And you can still put a fair amount of weed in it. It's easier to use than even rolling a joint. And the thing I like about blunts, and that I don't like about this though, is that blunts burn really slow. And that's nice for weed, especially if you're smoking good weed. So we're not using this. And like I said, we're not going to use a roller either, which this is helpful if you're starting out rolling joints. But the way I roll a blunt, it's pretty, you can roll a joint same way. All right, so this is some Maui Mango blunt wrap that I have here. And we're just going to open it up. We're going to empty out all the contents here. We're going to talk about them. All right. So most blunt wraps come with 2 pieces in. All right. Take one, save it for later. That's your next blunt. Unless you're just trying to like make a really big blunt, but that's whatever. I don't really use these pieces either. I wish they wouldn't put them in the packaging. You know, it's just extra paper. Some people use them like the way you have like the conical piece here.
Oh, it's the mouthpiece?
You can use them, but the way I'm gonna roll this blunt, it's already gonna have a mouthpiece, so
Nice.
we're gonna use that. All right, so we got our blunt wrap. Next, I know what you're wondering. Where's the weed? All right, so today I got Rainbow Kush. Where am I at one? There we go. Rainbow Kush, and this is from Noah Botanical, so it's my medical grade weed. This is a sativa, and I got a nickel here for size, so you can check that out. How big these nugs are, which are really nice. And once again, it's called Rainbow Kush. And
I love the planning ahead of having the nickel there, because the whole time I'm like, what's the nickel going to be for?
Oh, it's coming up too. So, all right. So, and I chose a nickel because you want about a nickel bag's worth of weed, right? So that's probably, I think I can get away with that. Maybe a little piece of this, right? Let's go roll us a nice blunt. All right. And so there's 2 ways to go about this. You can either break it up with your hands, like, and when you do that, you want your pieces to be, there we go, that, whoop, smaller than the head, right? So that way you don't have like big chunky pieces, right? So we can break it up. I like to do a little mix. I like to do a little bit partially broken up by hand because it's like logs on the fire, right? If you know how to build a fire, you want something more than just like sawdust. If you want it to burn good. All right, so we'll do that one by hand. Once again, back there, right? All right, and then we're gonna take this other big old nug, right? And we're gonna put this in my handy dandy here. I like this grinder because it's easy to just twirl around on the top. You still have to break it up a little bit to put it into the grinder, but you can put some pretty sizable chunks in there if you want. All right.
This is so amazing to me, Fina. This is just really educational. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And the thing I like about this too, on the top, you get to watch it. So hopefully, maybe that's a little bit too much weed, but we can work it. You just gotta work it, you know.
Yep.
There.
That's it. This is real world. This is not, made for TV. This is actually happening. So everybody gets to see it going. That's all right.
You say that.
That's no problem because
Real world.
yeah, well, you get that set that up. I have to comment on the fact. So I'm a person who smoked way back in the day. I think my last joint was maybe 1987, 1988.
Yeah.
Technology has come so far since then. I'm just stunned at this. Everything that
All
I
right,
used to
meanwhile,
do. Yep.
back in business. That's like one of those cooking show cutaways, and all of a sudden the chicken's out of the oven.
Right, exactly.
I'm like mesmerized by this. I really am.
I tell you what, if you could do this in a Julia Child voice, and now we extracted the marijuana from the. Sorry.
No. Now, I did do my nails for you guys, just so you know.
I love the gold. I was
Awesome.
gonna say, like, great choice.
Gold.
Gold.
Right? Pot of gold.
Perfect.
Yeah. Now, these grinders are kind of cool. I want to explain this grinder. So you got your top level, right? And that's
Yep.
where I put my weed in. So it's all nice and nuggy. That's extra stuff for the blunt later. That's great.
Yep.
Then you have this second level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where that's where I threw all the shake down. And then there's another level. And it's on the very bottom. For those that like the keef or whatever, there it is.
Oh my god, I didn't know my grinder had that.
Just
Yeah.
follow
Oh my
up with
God.
what is the keef?
That's just like the little THC crystals that fall off the nugs of weed. Now you see this, folks? This is what we call stem, right?
Mm.
We don't want this in our blunts because it will make a hole in your blunt or your joint. You really don't want to smoke them. I keep mine in a jar. So I can make a tea out of them later.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Is that good?
I know a lot of people who that's their jam
Oh.
is a little cannabis tea on a regular basis, made mostly from stems or leaves or leaves.
It definitely makes doing the dishes as a housewife a whole lot better. You know what I'm saying? Trying to be quick about this. I know I'm running out of time. But if I can't roll a blunt in 15 minutes, well, what good am I? I might be like 16, maybe 17 minutes. 17 minutes if you guys see me like light it up.
Well, we have to make sure it works. So
Of course it's going to work. That's the thing about blunts. It's as long as it smokes, it's great. It's fine. All right, so I put all that weed in there. Some people like to use like a card or something. Use a little card. Yeah. I don't. It doesn't matter.
you're
All right.
muted, Dan.
I just want to comment on the fact that was no ordinary card that was used there.
You like that?
Everything's on purpose. It's like
Yep.
This is high quality entertainment. I'm in love right now.
Well, if you haven't seen the movies that Fina's made, later on we'll come back and we'll post them in the comments because people should check out some of the movies that she's made.
Absolutely amazing.
It's going around award ceremonies right now. One of them is. It's pretty good. It's about military procedural compliance, and it's a musical. So I started out in the middle. I started out in the middle on this one, but did you notice that I definitely folded up all the stuff on the sides and edges and made sure that it was nice and smooth and cylindrical.
Yep.
All right. All right. This is, see this? What I
Yep.
just did.
Oh, let me go back
In
to
the cam.
weed cam.
Weed
Yep.
cam. Weed cam. Where you at? All right. This is the signature move right here. Got
Yep.
my weed. Roll it up. This is your mouthpiece. Make it tight. That's why you start in the middle.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Awesome.
Then you just finish it up. Mm-mm-mm.
All right.
You know, my mom used to roll joints on with one hand on her lap while she was driving.
That's my kind of woman.
There you have it.
That is amazing. Fina
15 minutes.
Bonanen, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
I wanted to make sure that there's people are already asking for the link. So can you, in the comments later on, post a link to some of your movies? Oh, wait, you're unmuted. Let me add WeedCam back in because that's the live microphone. So you post a link to some of your movies?
Yeah, I'll post a link for some of the trailers and some of the movies. One of the movies that, like I said, that's going around the award ceremonies right now, I did submit it to Liberty Fest, hoping that I get in it because that'd give me an excuse to go. Not trying to plug myself, but whatever.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for contributing to Pot of Gold. That was pretty amazing.
See, I'm teaching you guys stuff. Like that's what
You
this is
are.
about. It's educational. Because you got to take education back from the government, and that's all I want to do, Dan.
Well, speaking of taking things back from the government, we got another big guest coming up.
We do, but Dan,
Yes.
this is the only time I'm ever a communist, you know, and it's when I have to suffer. So if I had to see something tragic, everyone has to see something tragic. So play the clip, Dan.
All right.
Our suffering, never forget.
Yep. Hang on. Here it is. Share screen. Hang on. So that's it. It's a loop.
Yep.
We'll watch once more.
Why? Oh, God. I don't know what makes it the worst 10 seconds of my life, but it's the worst.
If we're going to show that, I mean, we just have to bring the man in right now. Libertarian vice presidential candidate.
Why?
Why? Because, like I said,
Princess
I had
made
to
me.
see it.
Princess
I had
made
to
me.
see it. And think about it this way: you're finally as pretty as your wife. So,
But
I
also,
would. Is that as pretty as my wife? I would disagree vehemently
you're
that
going to make
that's
him
as pretty as
defend
my
his
wife.
wife now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely in no way is that as pretty as my wife.
you're
I
as
think what
close
upsets
as
me the
you'll ever
most about-
get.
What upsets me the most about those is where the hell do my glasses go? It's like there's glasses, but then the stems just like fade away because none of the people that I get photoshopped onto have glasses on. So, hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Actually,
being here. You just finished a big speech in Atlanta, right?
I did. I am here in the beautiful Academy Theater speaking to this gigantic crowd. No, everyone's on lunch right now. And we're in Hateville in Atlanta, just outside of the airport. I'm here for the convention, and I'll be doing some stuff with Jo Jorgensen tomorrow at her luncheon. And then next week, I will be in beautiful Huntsville, Alabama, for the Libertarian Party of Alabama's convention there. So be sure to go to the Libertarian Party of Alabama Facebook page, Twitter, website, and so forth, or follow me on social media, and you'll find out all about that event. And hopefully, if you live anywhere near Huntsville, Alabama, you'll come out and see me there.
Are you still in Facebook jail?
In like 2 hours, I won't be.
Oh, wow, you're gonna be a free
I
man.
didn't even realize
I'm
that
going to be
that
a free man. Oh, yeah, it was a big thing. And I found a workaround. I can post stuff to Instagram and have it automatically share to my Facebook page, but I can't like I can't care react to anyone's comments, which is devastating right now. And
We've resorted to eating our young. Like, we don't know what to do without a spike cone carry.
yeah, it's like a Donner Party without me being able to care react. So I'll be back with my sweet care reacts very soon. Don't you worry, guys.
Well, I appreciate the fact too that that segues perfectly into our prohibition conversation, because we're looking at exactly that sort of thing, right? Is this first of all, I mean, obviously it's ridiculous, and we don't want to spend too much time talking about that place, but prohibition just makes people want you more, right? I mean, you are hotter now.
Anything I put out is getting at least double the reach it usually does. Because it's like, oh, Spike Cohen posted something. So you're right. When you put Spike Cohen, if you outlaw Spike Cohen, then only outlaws become Spike Cohen.
Right. But we make more outlaws because
it makes more outlaws. Now we're all Spike Cohen.
Exactly. We're all Spike Cohen outlaws. I am.
Will the real Spike Cohen please stand up?
I am happy to wear that bandana.
Well, it's like Spartacus. I am Spike Cohen. And then everyone gets up. It's funny.
So, I do want to give a quick shout out to the people who saw that video. It was made by our friend Chase Oliver, and who you're seeing right now in the Georgia convention.
Yes, I will certainly have a talk with him too. Thank you, Chase.
We're talking pot of gold. We're talking prohibition. And we were talking earlier about how prohibition is really larger than just drugs and alcohol. It's about control. And I was thinking, as you traveled around the country, I imagine that lots of people talked to you about things the government was prohibiting them from doing. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind?
So one thing, and it was actually related to marijuana. I had a lot of people come out to my events who had once been gone to jail for possessing marijuana. What a lot of people don't realize when it comes to cannabis is because cannabis possession is such a minor crime, they do anything that they can to try to knock it up to a distribution or intent to distribute charge. So if you get caught with like an ounce or a couple ounces or whatever the limit is in your area, they do anything possible to try to make it so that it was a possession charge. If you had it in multiple bags, or if there were people other than people in your household in the car with you when they pulled you up, anything they can do to try to say this is a possession. This is not just a possession charge. You're a drug dealer. You're a distribution charge. So there were a lot of people that basically went to jail for possession, but it was because they trumped it up to a distribution charge. And they'd come to my event and say, I can't vote. I can't legally own a firearm. I can't get a business license. I can't, and name off all these things that they either can't do or it is much more difficult for them to be able to do because they got caught with weed 6 years ago. And there were other people that came that, similar things happened with, cocaine or meth or whatever. But this was, we often realize that a lot of these other drugs, even though we also believe that they should be legal, we recognize that a lot of them are also, that there are a lot more risks associated with meth or, cocaine or heroin or something like that. This was weed. This was someone caught with an ounce of weed or a couple of ounces of weed, enough for them to smoke. I need to say anything related to my allegedly ever having smoked marijuana. South Carolina has no statute of limitations for any crime at all. So I'd just like to note that everything I'm saying moving forward is just a parody of the real. But if Spike Cohen
is that really true? No statute of limitations.
There is no statute of limitations.
Wow.
There's judicially a lot of judges and a lot of prosecutors won't prosecute or pursue something if it's gone past a certain time. I'm not risking it. So I've never done drugs in my life. But if I had ever smoked marijuana, I more than likely would have been carrying pounds. But I certainly never did that. But if I did, it would have been several ounces because that's what it would have hypothetically taken for me to get through the week. And if I had ever been caught with that, then that would have absolutely been a distribution charge. And my life trajectory could have gone completely different direction.
It's funny. There's a story that I heard on the campaign trail talking about that, saying, with the exception of Donald Trump, this was a 2016 story, the last 3 elected presidents all admitted that they had smoked dope.
Yes.
George Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama.
Yep.
And the thing about it is, knowing the different ways that drugs laws are enforced, if George Bush had been busted with marijuana, I mean, he was arrested with cocaine, and he became president of the United States. Smooth talking Bill Clinton gets busted. He'll talk his way out of it. Nice white boy from Arkansas, no big deal. If Barack Obama had been busted with a joint, he wouldn't be president. He would probably still be in jail.
Yeah, because what?
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because what happens is they get you for that. And often I talk to a lot of people that when they went to jail, they would often end up in some kind of maximum security situation. So here they are, they got busted for cannabis. Now they're in there with the proverbial rapists and murderers and hardened criminals and organized crime, local organized, gang members and things like that. And you've got to survive in there. They don't care that you shouldn't be in there. They don't care that you are, someone who was just getting high or treating a chronic pain issue or treating a mental health issue. They just know you're in there and you're prey. And so there were people who had to become a lot harder in there to survive than they ever would have been out in real life, because they got busted for having some weed on them. And as a result of that, they end up, they come out and they now aren't just someone who's had their life ruined, lost several years of their life, aren't able to get a license, aren't able to own a weapon, aren't able to vote, might still be on parole, aren't able to leave the state, aren't allowed to associate with some of their friends. But in addition to that, they're dealing with the psychological trauma of having to be a hardened criminal just to survive being in penitentiary. And very often, that's why the recidivism rate is as high as it is because that's what that's how you survive. Then you go out into a foreign world. The vast majority of people who come out of prison, this is something we don't talk about a lot, their credit's been ruined because people knew they were in jail. They found their social security number and they ran it to hell, and there was no way for them to appeal it because they didn't even know what was happening. So they come out, their credit's ruined, their financial future's ruined, but they know how to commit crimes, and that leads them off into going back to jail. They were not criminals. They should not be treated this way. And the only thing we can do is end this war on drugs and restore people's lives.
You raise a fantastic point, and it looked, Princess, like you wanted to jump in for a second. Was there something you wanted to say?
Nope.
Okay, so then I want to go back. I want to go back to this idea. Well, it's one of those things that you start speaking Spike, and people get that amen, that sort of thing, preaching the response.
Absolutely.
But this idea of the sort of powering on. I know you got something to go to after this, but if you check the rest of the schedule, and I want to tell people coming up, we have the Reverend Dr. Aaron Lewis on talking about the sweet and sour of redemption, as it has to do with the fact that there is this stigma that even if, now that we say, okay, cannabis is legal and, Princess is working so hard in the Emancipation Project to get people out of jail, there's going to be the stigma of the fact that they were in jail. And even if you were to get something expunged, right? So legal, for those who don't know, expunged is a legal term to have something removed from your legal record. Your friends and family all still know, and there's still that story. You know what? Dan went to jail, and I'll say it. I'm a person who I've been in jail, and that is something that is a story that is told about me, and nothing will ever change that.
We need to not just decriminalize victimless crimes; we need to destigmatize them and normalize them. We actually have a precedent that we can look at for this. There was a stigma between slaves and free people who were Black during the period of slavery. Even after slavery ended, there continued to be a sort of class or tier system within those communities of people who had at one point been slaves and people who had never been slaves. Now, keep in mind, we all recognize that slaves were there due to no fault of their own. They weren't seen as criminals. They weren't seen as anything wrong with them. They were completely victimized for nothing that they did, completely for an intrinsic quality about themselves that they had no control over, and the fact that they were born into it. And yet there was still that stigma because they were one point in that lowly place and this other group were not. And unfortunately, we as people often look for ways to try to make ourselves feel better about ourselves, often at the expense of others, which is why this isn't just about decriminalizing it. It's not just about getting it off of people's records. It's not just about letting them be able to vote, letting them be able to participate in society, be able to own a firearm legally, be able to start a business or whatever. It's also about changing the conversation about drug ownership, about sex work, about any of these about tax evasion for that matter, about any of these victimless crimes, that these are not bad people And what happened to them was a victimization of them. It was not a punishment. It was a victimization. And we should not look down at victims. We should look at them as victims, and we should promote them, and we should support them, and we should celebrate their victories, and we should encourage them. And so ending the war on drugs, it's not just a war in police departments and a war in prisons and a war in state houses and in Congress. It's a war in our minds. Is someone bad because they had an addiction? Is someone bad because they had a chronic pain issue? Is someone bad because they didn't have a good lawyer because they couldn't afford it? If the answer to that is no, then don't treat them like they were bad for it.
Yeah. You know, Princess, now I know you have something to say because you're muted.
There's just something about Spike that makes me want to like vote for something, you know? And like, I'm just not that kind of person, but just something about Spike, like, yeah, I'll register. I'll fill out a bubble. Yeah, after that, I'll vote. You're absolutely right,
that.
Spike.
Go with that instinct. Go with that feeling.
So
it'll
what you're
dissipate
saying,
as soon as you leave the screen, okay? It'll like go right out the window because if voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it, right?
so
Right?
it's funny because we talked about prohibition and how there's not really people who are drug pushers per se, but Spike might be a vote pusher. He's
a vote pusher.
Come on.
I got votes for all day. The first vote's free. That's how I get you. And then after that, no, the votes are always free.
You know,
Free.
one of the things you talk, go ahead, Princess.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, this idea of, you know, should somebody be punished because, you know, they're one way or another, they became addicted to a pain medication. That's one of the most amazing statistics is that 80% of the people who are addicted to opiates start off using somebody else's prescription pain medication.
Yep.
So those drugs came. Yeah, go ahead.
And not only that, but they would have continued to be able to safely, under their doctor's direction, be able to continue using those pain prescriptions if the FDA didn't set in and set a limit on the number that they could have in their lifetime. That's a story that we often don't talk about. Someone gets prescribed because they certainly can't use cannabis because cannabis is dangerous. Here's some Oxycontins or some Vicodins. And, you know, that works for a while. And if it's properly managed with a pain management doctor, your side effects are going to be minimal. The few side effects you have can be managed with other probably over-the-counter stuff. And your pain's somewhat manageable. And they can escalate it slowly over time and be able to deal with it. Because you certainly can't use cannabis. That's very dangerous. And then at one point, your doctor says to you, yeah, you can't use any more ever again. Now what? Now you've got an addiction because opioids are addicting. Now you've got a chronic pain issue that got worse over time because the doctor wasn't treating your actual issue. They were treating your symptoms, but that's a whole other discussion. And now you've got those things compounded and you're being told pretty quickly, yeah, you're going to have to find something else out. Certainly not weed though, because that's dangerous. And so now they're having to look at what they're going to do. And what ends up happening is they're now they're using someone else, they're squatting on someone else's prescription. They're paying 5 and 10 times as much for their prescriptions as they were paying before because now they're having to do it illegally. And then one day someone tells them, you know, it's a lot cheaper, Lactar heroin and fentanyl.
Yeah. And
you can get your pain management dealt with a lot cheaper.
Right. And that's the sad thing about it is that most people who are getting addicted to somebody else's pain medication,
yep,
they get to that spot where they can't afford this is hypothetical, like Spike. I'm not admitting that I happen to know how much drugs sell for, but they get to the point that they can't afford $50 for a day's worth of Vicodin.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know what? I can get a lot of heroin for $50. And I'm just going to chip. I'm not going to do a lot. I don't know how I know these terms, but I'm going to be careful about it. So Spike, as somebody said here, you are spitting truths.
You know, that hits like really close to home because like the first time I got high was on Percocets after a surgery because they were mine, guys. Don't worry. When I lost my thumb, they were mine. I lost my thumb and I had to be on Percocets. And that was the first time I ever did a drug like that. And they were prescribing those fuckers like candy. And I was taking them like that too because that shit's fun. I was floating on air. Oh my God.
That's the other thing about it is that people don't know who haven't done opiates how amazing they are.
They're amazing. Oh,
They're
those
amazing.
are cheat codes for your brain.
Yep.
When I had my wisdom teeth taken out in 2000, they gave me hydrocodone syrup.
Yeah.
I just knew it was cough syrup. I went home and I went, oh, I suddenly didn't care that my mouth was full of bloody gauze and that I couldn't, you know, like my mouth hurt and everything. It didn't matter anymore. Now imagine Princess, imagine if when you had dealt with your surgery, imagine if they had been able to use cannabis.
Right, exactly. Which,
And probably had similarly effective pain management with no risk of addiction, also cheaper and much lower side effect profile.
no risk of death either.
No risk of death.
Because when I lost my go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
When I lost my prescription, because it was a work comp case, so like after a while they'll just stop prescribing it, and there's no fucking warning. Your case is just over, and it's like, what? I can't have Percocets anymore, and like going through that as like a teenager. I was 19 years old when I did that, and like that was a fucking nightmare. So like to be able to like not jump, like just dip your toes into drugs before you're thrusted into it for a medical issue, and you come out with an addiction, and like none of that was your fault, because it's not my fault I lost my thumb, it's not my fault I had to do surgery, it's not my fault I had to go to Percocets, and then now I'm shaking in my bed because I can't have Percocets.
It's terrible. The things are broken. Spike Cohen, as always,
so much, Spike.
Dropping the knowledge.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here. You're in Georgia right now. What else? And you said you're going to Alabama next weekend?
I will be in Huntsville, Alabama next weekend. Come out and see me. Beautiful Huntsville, Alabama. I know it's beautiful. I've never been there before, but I'm sure it's beautiful. And we're going to have a great time there. John Mons is also going to be there. Awesome. I'm going to be doing a live taping of the Seth and Willie Fred show. Princess, you know them. And we're going to be having a lot of fun out there. And so come out and see me. Look up, either follow me on social media or follow me on social media and follow the Libertarian Party of Alabama and see, you can get all the information on how to come out and see me. I'd love to meet you in person. Thank you guys for having me on.
To hear more knowledge about your podcast, where do they go to find that?
Muddied Waters Media. You can find that anywhere on the internet. Muddied Waters. I got to do it this time. Muddied Waters Media. Or Spike Cohen. Either of those things on the internet, you will find me. I'm everywhere.
Awesome. Thanks again, Spike. Always a pleasure to have you with us. You know, that guy, you're right. He makes you want to vote. He makes me want to just go out there and set the world free. It's awesome to have guys like that. Now, speaking of Freedom Warriors, go ahead.
What?
Go ahead,
Speaking
Princess.
of Freedom Warriors.
Well, I was going to say, because you got another one waiting to come on the show right now.
I know. We have such an amazing lineup, and I'm so thrilled that everyone's. Oh, fuck! It's snowing. I'm so thrilled that everyone's.
You're getting 40 inches of snow.
I know. Don't think for a second that I don't hate my life right now.
I don't want to give away, but Princess is in Denver, and they're getting 40 inches of snow today.
Fucking 40 today, just today.
40 inches. Yeah.
It's also going to snow on Monday too. Okay.
No, you should be grateful that it's spread out, because if we were 40 inches in the next hour, that would be too hard.
Well, you know what? I'm just blessed to not be a Texan. Is it too soon? Is it too soon to make Texas jokes?
Well, we'll let it go. But we're going to start making New York jokes soon, because
you can always
our next guest
talk shit about New York. Our next guest is Thomas Quitter. I'm so excited to talk to him. Perfect segue from talking about healthcare and like how cannabis and other drugs that are blocked from prohibition can help people take back their lives.
Yep. And here we go. Welcome, Thomas. Welcome back.
I love your shirt.
Thank you. This was a gift from a supporter.
I absolutely fucking love it. It's perfect.
And I hate to correct you, but it's Queeter. Always Queeter, never Quitter.
Okay.
Rarely Quieter.
Queeter, right?
Queeter, yep. Think French.
My apologies. Well, thank you so much for coming on. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, medical cannabis, right? First, I want to kind of purport or encourage the use of the word cannabis instead of marijuana or pot or anything else. And there's one key reason to that. People often try to argue that hemp and the cannabis that we would use for medical reasons with THC, whether it's recreational or for treatment, are different. They try to argue that they're different. And they're no different than a black Labrador is different from a yellow Labrador. Genetically, they're just as close. And the misnomer is that our government can separate them by regulation. It's just ridiculous. But I'm a medical cannabis user, And let's start with how that came about. When I was 8 years old, much like what you were just talking about, I was prescribed codeine. And I was overprescribed. I was prescribed an overdose by a doctor. When I was 10 years old, because we had realized that, opiates probably not the best for me, my doctor pulled me aside. This was 1993 when it was illegal. He risked his medical license and his career to say, try cannabis. And what I've found over the years is that it works much better for pain. It works much better for inflammation. And it has none of the horrible side effects that opiates do. As you were discussing, when you come down from opiates, that's a horrible, horrible thing to do. And I went on later in life to actually develop a problem with prescription opiates, because if you're in a situation like mine, you go to the doctor and, you're seeking drugs, all you got to do is say, come on, and they hand you whatever they want. And I've even been offered OxyContin for a sinus infection, which is ridiculous. So, the other thing I really want to bring up is the endocannabinoid system. That is a system of biological processes within our body and the bodies of most mammals and many other animals, even right down to the hydra, which you might remember studying in biology in high school, a little multicellular organism. That is absolutely correct, Daniel. So that means that we have systems within our bodies that are meant to use cannabinoids, and our own brains actually produce some cannabinoids. And so our government is telling us that these things have to be illegal, even though we produce them ourselves. They're also in other plants. Now, I knew by the time I was 13, a few weeks before I was 13, that cannabis was for me because, well, prohibition doesn't work. A 40-pound severely disabled child in a wheelchair living in a very small rural community could get cannabis at the drop of a hat. So,
not to go too specific, but upstate New York?
Yes. So, dead center, actually. Shenango County is just about dead center of the state. Now, I later learned that there was a study done on CBD in Israel regarding bone fractures. They found that when CBD was present, a bone fracture would heal more quickly, and the healed bone would be stronger than without it. My condition is brittle bones. That's my own personal story about this. I also have many other issues that involve inflammation, and it just covers everything overall for me. Now, this morning, I was actually appointed branding and marketing director for the Nug of Knowledge, which you can find at nugofknowledge.com, where a company is seeking to supply legal mail order cannabis products that include CBD and terpenes. We even have some honey on the website right now, and we have Delta 8 THC, which is a legal form of THC. It is not illegal. You can order it by mail. But how did I get into that? I got into that by being the first recipient of their compassionate care program. This is not your typical straight pot, right? The government would say this is hemp, but does that look like hemp to you? To me, it looks like weed.
No, it doesn't.
It does not have much THC because of government regulation, but it is high in CBD and terpenes and other beneficials that can help you. A lot of people don't realize even the chlorophyll, if you're making an edible, is beneficial. It's an antioxidant. So what can cannabis do for healthcare, right? I mean, that's what I wanted to talk about, cannabis in healthcare. Those opiates we were talking about?
Yeah.
They're subsidized. Taxpayers are paying for them before they're even prescribed. So if you could just grow your own cannabis instead of using a tax-funded system, for something that's bad for you. Doesn't that make more sense?
Absolutely.
I keep looking up and to the right because my screen's a little over here. But you know, a lot of people do not understand that cannabis prohibition has never worked. It's never worked. You can't find a prohibition that has actually worked. The only thing of any prohibition ever done is detrimented people. And even when you go back to the alcohol prohibition, people were dying of the DTs because we didn't know how to handle the DTs at the time. So when they couldn't get their alcohol, they would actually die from the DTs. But, you know, it's absurd that our government does not allow us to have an easily grown plant that you can grow literally anywhere. And a good reference for this actually is the state of Maine. They're the opposite of that. They actually allow patient grow. I have an aunt there who has cancer. She's allowed to grow her own cannabis. They have caregivers who can grow for patients. And when you really get into the nitty gritty of the different strains, you can find a strain for you no matter what your issue is. Low THC, high THC, whether you're looking for more CBD, even specific terpenes that are great for inflammation or increasing or decreasing appetite. I've actually met people who have lost weight by using cannabis. Doesn't really facilitate or doesn't really mesh with what we think of when it comes to, say, munchies, right?
True.
But certain strains of sativa, in fact, actually give you an energy buzz, and you want to do more, and can suppress your appetite. THCV would be the compound that I'm most familiar with. It's an appetite suppressant. You know,
You muted, Dan.
oh, he's got a drink.
Dang it. All
Drink.
right.
Actually, you know what? For me, would you eat one of those edibles?
All right, hang on. Oh no,
He's
I
gonna
turned
do
my
it
camera
off
off.
camera.
That's a disaster. I didn't mean to turn
You
it
wouldn't
off.
want to do anything illegal on
Oh,
camera.
okay.
Hang on just a sec. Let me reload.
So I have my own smokable.
Yeah, I've been smoking behind camera too, just like chilling behind
All
camera.
right. No, but now I'm not on. Where's my camera? All right. I may have done a disastrous thing by doing this. Well, Thomas, I want to thank you very much for being here and for doing this, dropping some knowledge on us. And we are about to just quickly, if people want to know more about you, you ran for Congress. Is there a website you want to plug or anything?
I ran for state senate. You can
State
go to
Senate, right.
tom452.com, TOMFOR52.com. And actually, if you go to the nugofknowledge.com, if you're interested in cannabis products or Delta 8 THC, you can use that same Tom452, TOMFOR52 for a discount on the products page. We are going through some rebranding and some website redesign right now. So in the next month or two, you're going to see a lot of change, a lot more information get added to the site. And I'm really happy to see where this is going. And we are hoping to help out those who cannot afford their medicinal cannabis.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Thomas. We really appreciate you being here. Now, it's so awkward that my camera has decided to shut out, but you can still hear me,
Yeah,
right?
just talking to an empty room. You have nice
Yeah,
furniture,
no,
though.
it's-
Do you play the
it's-
piano?
I can play the piano a little bit. You know, it's funny. It's one of my biggest regrets in life was that I was such a discipline problem that I stopped taking lessons because I argued with my mother too much, who was my teacher. We look back on stuff like that. I would say to you guys at home, don't argue with your mom about teaching. But one of our next guest is a person who I had occasion to meet the first time he came to my office in Washington, D.C. He was running for mayor in Hartford. And I was just blown away that there was, because I was in Massachusetts, Boston and Hartford, not that far away, that there was this libertarian, dynamic, preaching, literally, the message of freedom. And I never heard of this guy. And it goes to the point that, we've said a couple times beforehand that libertarians often we don't convert people to libertarians. People discover that they're libertarians. And so our next guest Dr. Aaron Lewis. Welcome, Dr. Lewis. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
But
So
thank you
glad
so much
to
for
be here.
being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You are a guy who, that's exactly what happened, right? You suddenly burst onto the libertarian scene because you have heard more about us. It wasn't that we converted you or anything like that.
Right.
How much of that, can you tell us a little bit about your path, and then we'll sort of get into this, our topic of
Well, absolutely. I mean, so just a little bit about me. So I'm a actual spiritual leader. I actually pastor a church in the city of Hartford. I'm a humanitarian. I've traveled to 61 countries around the world, bringing medical aid. I brought books. I built schools in several countries around the world, particularly in developing nations, in Dominican Republic, in South Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya, just to name a few of the countries, Colombia. And so I've spent the greater part of my life bringing hope to people, bringing aid to people. I've consulted two governments in the area of education, which is my background. I'm very heavy into children's education, as well as in the area of health reform, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa as it related to the AIDS epidemic back in the 80s and 90s. And so that's what my passion is to help people. I had become very, very disenfranchised with the Democratic Party that I had belonged to for 8 years. Prior to that, I was an independent, but I was disenfranchised, and in those short terms, that the party did not and does not do what it says that it's going to do. And so it definitely has propped itself to be the party for all Black people, the party for Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and Asians. That's how it purports itself to be. And then the way that they do that is by highlighting a few key elements of emotional pain for Black people, be it slavery, be it the civil rights movement, be it police brutality, things that are very salient points, things that matter to us. And they ride on those points alone. They don't fix the points. They don't fix any of that stuff, but they talk about those things in such a way that it appeals to the masses. And then most people of color says, well, you know, we have to vote Democrat all the time, every day, no matter what. And if we don't, then we lose our Black card. You know, we no longer have our American Express Black card. You know what I'm saying? We somebody else. And so with that mindset, I just felt to myself, come on, there has to be something better. And that's really what led me. It led me to seek out and search out a better way. And that's when I discovered the Libertarian Party. And I love it, the party of principle. And it's also the party of liberty and freedom. And that was my path to finding the party, because I was tired of the two-party system, that people felt there was no other choice, if that makes any sense to you.
And so, you know, on this day, we're doing the Pot of Gold broadcast. I'm sorry, I'm an empty living room talking right now. But, you know, specifically, this is an issue of when we talk about prohibition, right, that has dramatically affected the African-American community differently than it has everybody else.
Without question.
And one of the things that I want to talk about with you about this, you know, being a practicing minister, and we talk about this idea. So you don't know, but Princess, or maybe Princess is involved in this thing called the Emancipation Project, which the idea is that people who are in jail right now for things that are about to become legal, right? In a state where, you know, you could be in jail right now serving time for possession of marijuana, and the law will change. And now you're serving time for a crime that wasn't legal, isn't illegal anymore.
Right.
But there's that stigma involved with being arrested in the first place. And so when we talk about changing the laws, we have to make sure that we're not leaving behind all these people who, you know, have this stigma associated with it. And I was thinking, you know, you're a guy who's been there. You have seen that as a minister in the community. You have seen people who, you know, they have this thing that they didn't do anything that's really wrong, but it's going to punish them for the rest of their lives. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of that aspect. You know, it's the sweet and sour of redemption. Even if we say, okay, you're not guilty anymore, there's still something there.
So I mean, and well asked, and I'm glad for the work that Princess is doing. I love your name, and I love that you're being the princess that you are, and so I appreciate you. I really that's true love from my heart to yours. But
Thank you.
But the thing is that the entire law was initially forged not just under racist underpinnings and with racist intent. It was an unjust law to begin with. The law was created to, at that time, back in the 30s, it was a Jim Crow umbrella. And the law was created because the drug cannabis was particularly used by Blacks and Mexicans at the time. That was who used it. And so the fear was that when people used this drug, that there was going to be miscegenation of sex between the races, which would weaken the white pure race. That was the idea behind making this. And when we even say drug, you know, I use that word very loosely because, you know, we demonize some drugs, but then we praise others, right? You know, the vaccine is praised in America in most circles, right? Even though it's an emergency vaccine, but then marijuana is demonized. Something's very fundamentally skewed when we pick our drugs. and so the whole law was rooted in racism, yet now in 2020, we're still, I saw your face just now.
I had it for a second. Keep going. Keep going, Dr. Lewis.
And so now, this many years later, it's a complete embarrassment to our nation that we're still grappling. I mean, I don't know if you ever thought about that side of it, Dan. The stuff that we deal, race issues in America should not even exist anymore. Some stuff is ridiculous. It's an embarrassing thing that our government can't. We freaking sent people to the moon, but we can't teach a Black dude and a white dude how to get along. Think about how nonsensical that is. And so the lawmakers, many of whom are just unjust people, they have no ounce of justice in their system. They make laws with the intent of disparaging people. So now when you talk about the clerics, right? Most clerics, and I'm saying this very sympathetically, they get it wrong. They don't know what they're talking about when they talk about the marijuana issue, but I'm not mad at them. I feel compassion for them because they're ignorant with probable cause. And the reason why they're ignorant with probable cause, because you have to look at this thing contextually. So in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, their sons and their daughters that used cannabis were being arrested. They were being beat down by cops, right? And why? Because the propaganda said that the use of it was bad and it made you do bad things, even though there's absolutely unequivocally no evidence to prove that. There's no evidence that proves that if you ingest cannabis that you're going to harm people or rape people. None of that. But yet that was the propaganda that they actually pushed. They had people with black faces, that literally with horns. They have pictures with horns and the black face, and he's going after a white woman, who was the prize of the universe. And so we don't want our white woman to be contaminated by this black devil. And so this is in the 30s, and I'm looking at these, these caricatures, and I'm saying, wow, this is some racist BS. This is crazy to me. But yet it was the underpinning tone of what we are now living out. And then you've got families that have been completely eviscerated because of this unjust law. So now the minister then says, we don't want that stuff in our community at all right? Because it destroys families. And it's almost like if you take a stick, Dan, and hit a dog. I raised dogs all my life. You take a stick and you hit a dog, right? You keep hitting that dog with a stick. Guess what the dog's going to do? He's going to start biting the stick.
Yeah.
Right? He's not going to bite you. And every time he sees a stick, his mind is going to say, I got to bite sticks. I got to bite sticks. I got to bite sticks. Why? Because he's keep getting hit with the stick. The same thing with the stupid marijuana laws, right? We're not ever biting the legislative bodies who are behind the perpetuation of these ridiculous laws. We don't get them. We just get the stick. And you know what the stick is? Oh, it looks bad because propaganda makes it look bad. And so I actually love to talk about this topic because I understand it from not only an intellectual point of view, I understand it from a street point of view, and I understand it from a justice point of view. So when people say crazy, childish stuff about the Libertarian Party, oh, you're a part of the party of druggies. Okay, now, but just think about how crazy that sounds, right? But the United States pharmaceutical companies, German pharmaceutical companies, Swedish pharmaceutical companies, right? They push more drugs than God can even stand, right? He would pass out, but yet they're not demonized. They're not demonized. We don't call the Republican Party the party of drugs, or the Democratic Party the party of drugs. Yet they conspire with one another in a very true way to pour and pilfer trillions of dollars into the drug industry. But then you pick on a libertarian for a joint, for some weed. Think about how crazy that sounds. And that's all propaganda, but it disproportionately affects people of color all the way around. Not only were they in prison for years and years and years, now you need a $2 million bond to actually, to start a cannabis business. Come on, man. How many people can be bonded at that level?
Well, and that's, you bring one of the great points. I want to come back to that idea that, in theory, we've got this, redemption of, oh, we're finally waking up. We're being a little more reasonable about cannabis, but it's not being shared equally between everybody. This thing that you talked about, they did the same thing in Massachusetts when they opened up their first 3 recreational places. They all ended up being owned by law enforcement, people who had, served as in the either police or state police or something like that, because that's how government rolls when it talks about the thing and talks about redeeming or having some form of reparations for the drug war. That, it's been very frustrating for me, and I know for you as well. I really appreciate the way you've been out fighting that stuff. Is there, you're getting a lot of real positive reviews on this. I'm wondering, and people can follow your writing, they want to find out more about you. Are you going to be running again anytime soon?
I'm considering, and I'm toying with the concept of running for governor for the state of Connecticut. Our state is in desperate need of reform, as many states are. And one of the things that I've noticed, even with answering your question, so I'm kind of like doubling back around, and I appreciate this forum. I appreciate People for Liberty, because we're one of the few forums, literally, in America where we actually have an opportunity to speak our truth. If you've noticed, and I know you have, Dan, that we've been censored, and I'm not just talking about libertarians, but just anybody that opposes bad government. We've been censored like crazy on the Twitters, on the Facebooks, on all of the different social media platforms. And I think right now, and I'm saying this very honestly, it's the best time to criticize government in our lives. And if we don't do it now, and I'm not saying it for the sake of criticism, I'm saying it for the sake of reform. Right now, our government is on life support. And if we don't speak to what's going on, we're going to see a government fail miserably, and we're not going to have freedom. So I'm definitely sincerely considering it, because for that purpose, we have to get people in government that actually understands what time it is and will work for the people, because there's not enough people working for the people anymore.
I appreciate that very much, Dr. Lewis. You are a guy who knows what time it is. We're very grateful to have you on here for People for Liberty, our Pot of Gold broadcast. And you and I'm sorry that my camera has just failed me entirely, but I appreciate seeing you again too, because you're a guy that reminds me things do get better. I can't despair too much about liberty, because there are people like you who are out there fighting for it. So thank you so much for being on our broadcast. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely. I love all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So here's where we're going. Our next guest is a good friend of our show, and hopefully she has a working camera as well. But what I'm going to do is I am going to, after I bring you on, hey, Mercedes, are you there? You want to turn your camera on? Yeah. So that's good.
Mercedes.
Hi.
And I'm going to
You
leave
caught me
you
while I
two.
was cooking. I thought I had a little bit more time. Let
You
me
look
grab
great,
some
though.
headphones quick and I have my mobile set up out here, but lucky for us, I'm a mom. So it's a mobile setup.
That's adorable. I fucking love that.
It's great. Let me just tell you, hi, princess, what's up?
You know what? I'm just hanging out on a broadcast, you know?
Are
And,
you? I've been too. I've been stalking everybody backstage and going along with the commentary. It's been fun for me.
It's been fun
wow,
for
this
me.
is
I
really
always
lovely.
love hanging out with you guys. Like, it's always a
Live
good
from
time.
my kitchen. It's Saturday night. Evening. It's Saturday evening. I don't want any copyright infringements. That was just too good. Hi. Yeah, I'm here now.
There we go.
Yeah. Hello.
Perfect. You nailed it.
I did.
So
Killed it.
So for those, we're Liberty Sisters, but for our audience that doesn't know you, please tell us who you are.
I am Mercedes Damertowski. I ran for Nebraska State Legislature in 2020 for District 37 here in Nebraska. I don't remember if I said I'm from Nebraska. It's really easy to forget that we exist here. Hey, babe, would you get my notes off the bed? I took notes because we're going to talk about.
Prepared.
Oh, and the best part is that, okay, so I'm involved in the Libertarian Party. Like, you know, I'm a little liberty fighter. If you don't know me, I'm very opinionated. I do a lot of lives that are very spicy. Sometimes they are great. Sometimes they are not. But every time they are exactly how I feel in that moment, which is very important because mental health is my main champion, which is the fundamental problem with our criminal justice system is it's not based on rehabilitation. It's based on slavery.
Anything to make money, though. You know, we're feeding the industrial everything for profit.
Everything.
And
yes.
The thing I find gross is the government says they privatize the prison industry because they can do it for cheaper, which means like they're going to be feeding criminals, like they're inventing criminals for us, and that just stacks the odds against us.
Yeah, it's a multi-generational drug war. That's just one prohibition after another after another.
The state gets fined if like we don't keep the prisons at a certain capacity. So you're telling me if I follow the law, you're gonna fuck me in my wallet? So you either fuck me in the prisons or you fuck me in the wallet. Great. Don't drop the soap, babes. Don't drop the soap. Nowhere.
That's why they put rope on the soap. So, you know, just let it be. And remember to turn your back and squat. Babe, can you turn down everything on the oven? Because we're going to get into this now. And I don't need to worry about anything but you. I love you. So, so back to this prison problem in Nebraska. I love my state. I hate my government. And
you and me both.
Oh God, bless America. I'm fortunate enough to live in a purple district in Kearney. I'm in the center of the state, center of the interstate in the state. We're in the 3rd district. We're one of the bigger, like in my district for the Tri-Cities LP&E, it's Kearney, Grand Island, and Hastings. It's Hall County, Adams County, Buffalo County. So I live in Kearney, in Buffalo County. And so out here, it's very rural. We're considered rural. We're the hub out here because we have a college, which is very liberal. Darn that education. Sorry about you. I just want to go farm. But actually, our farmers out here are so highly educated that we lead agriculture when it comes to renewable, sustainable agriculture because we care about runoff and we care about our topsoil and we care about our water because we are on the Ogallala Aquifer. And so when we have a brain drain because people like me want to get the hell out because we have all these racist rednecks that are using the drug war to lock up my friends. Like when oh, hi, Cora. It's okay. We're just talking about your friends going to jail. You know, your cousins. all your cousins because I'm Mexican, you know, it's fine. It's not fine. So what I'm saying is a repeat in the cycle in my community where when I was growing up in the 80s, the drug war was violent here. We had cartel. Like my family, my mom's side is super heckin' white, like Irish and German and like heckin' white. So the Irish part's from Kearney because Kearney is a very Irish city. Like I make the joke, I'm gonna run the snakes out of Kearney. Ha ha, happy St. Patrick's Day. Because that's like, even my Mexican is Irish. So the Irish just kind of gets in there and makes you potato stew and just wants you to like do drugs and be happy. And so my family during Prohibition was part of the Irish mob. And so now with the marijuana prohibition and the drug war that affected my family in the 80s and 90s, me specifically, I'm a victim of the drug war. My dad did meth. Hi. And because of that, I see the kids that are 30, I'm 30, they are now being they've been institutionalized. They started in school. Their mental health was never addressed. Mine was, and I got to run for office. How come my friends that I grew up on the same block are in jail now as habitual criminals because they like cocaine on strippers' asses? Like, I'm sorry. Why are my friends going to jail because they were abused and watched your parents do blow? Like, why are we not addressing the systematic issues? And so, like, last year in the COVID, Nebraska did never shut down. Our government, I'm not even going to touch it. Fuck them. So, but they released a lot of non-offenders. They tried to decrowd the system. They were trying, like my campaign specifically was highlighting, I had Nebraska's for prison reforms endorsement. Yeah, look at, I did that. I don't know how.
I'm so proud of you. I'm just so proud of you and like everything that you do.
Thank
You're like a real life Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, thanks. I'm even a welder. So, but that's just it, is that when you're on the ground fighting like this and your friends are going to jail and you're watching them lose their cases because they have a public defender that's in the bar the night before getting hammered, you really start to not minimize what you're doing and how you feel and the things that you are doing, because it doesn't feel like enough. It never feels like enough, especially federal drug crimes.
Mercedes, like, prison reform.
Prison reform. So what we can do, here are the solutions. So I've been doing nothing but researching this my whole life. And what we can do is there is a NORADIC system of criminal justice prison reform where the principle is based on normality. So it's basically the parole probation system we have now, but in the prison. Like the guards are more like social workers. Each guard has 2 to 3 people. They talk about what's going on instead of letting it evolve into a dangerous situation that creates violent criminals, which is what we're trying to prevent. Instead of focusing on rehabilitation and nonviolent offenders and keeping them from becoming habitual criminals who are walking down the street with knives in their hand, threatening my grandpa because he doesn't have a cell phone. That happened. That happened because he didn't get mental health help. And because if we switched more to a compassionate system where we're not locking people up because they're naughty, we're addressing that these people are hurting and they are trying to get relief with drugs or alcohol or hookers, and the system's denying it. They're profiting off of our suffering because it's not profitable to fix this stuff. And instead of just directing it to, oh, we can legalize weed and tax that, we're like, oh no, let's lock these people up and have indentured servitude in our constitution until we vote it out and almost have it not pass because 50% of the population doesn't understand it. That happened.
I blame public education. But
that's
also,
just it. Yes, my love.
But also, I want to say it is profitable to fix it. It's just not profitable for a particular group of people, because if everyone is at their max capacity and being contributing to society, we'd be going to the moon. We'd be in different dimensions. Like, think about everything we could get done if God would get out of our way. But then also, like, think about the mental health behind it and why people turn to drug use so heavily. Like, they're escaping something in the reality that's not very pleasant to deal with, and they lack the tools and the resources to get through that so that they can be self-actualized and reach their full potential. And it's absolutely cruel and unusual to go ahead.
In our system, if you are like us, you either go to jail, sober up or you die. Those are our options because they are using the criminal justice system and the prison system to put people with mental health issues away so they don't have to address it. It's profitable, it creates, and when we're tearing each other's shit apart, the building industry booms. Look at the riots, look at the building costs that are happening. It's a chain effect because war is profitable. Thank you, Daddy Gov.
But like also, if we don't teach people the tools to like bring themselves together and like fix their mental health, they have nothing to pass on to their children, and it's how they keep us in their system. I think Dan wants us to shut up.
Oh
no, not at all. Actually, I am improvising here. I have complete camera failure on my computer, so I'm now on via my phone. But you've been knocking out these points. I really appreciate it, Mercedes. And the thing about it is that, you know, a lot of times people think, oh, it's just a big city problem. But you're in Nebraska.
I'm
right?
in the middle of freaking Nebraska. And that is another problem, is that we don't have access to healthcare. We are in a healthcare desert. We're in a desert. Hi, the prairie is a desert. But not just that, is we have, I live in a police state, a classist police state, 100%. I had coffee with the mayor, who's my mom's friend. Hi, Mom. I hope you don't see this. But I'm like, we're not racist here per se, but we are classist, and he didn't deny it. So if we have a police state that's classist, that is enforcing the drug war, because our cops are scary. How are we going to fix that? In our community, over the last couple of years, she's so hungry. Our local government has taken these issues into account. We got a new police chief. They introduced different training programs. You know, they've been weeding the force out. They've been doing everything, because I protested all summer, because that's what you do when you're locked up in your house, is you go protest with your masks on, because that's a smart thing to do when you don't want government to know who you are. But they are addressing these issues. They are taking into account what we're saying and how we're saying it, and they are addressing it and doing things about it, which is really, really weird for me. But the change I see here in my community over the last 3 years now is astronomical. We have a Be Kind campaign. We're not locking up nonviolent offenders as much. We have this thing called mental health court. I can't touch that right now. I don't have enough information on it to not make a biased opinion on it. But
I appreciate that about
mental health court.
Well,
Yeah, I was going to say the branding's off.
Yeah, I mean, but what they're doing is they're taking these drug addicts and they are sending them to rehab and then putting them on drug court, and then they have to jump through all these hoops, and if they miss a step, they go back to rehab and start all over. So they're getting there, but it's still within the court system and needs to not be within the court system.
Yeah,
but we're really we're private here. We're working on it. It's always a work in progress. We're trying to undo centuries of systematic oppression and mental health trauma.
Steps.
It's all about baby steps.
Baby steps.
Baby steps, and not quitting. And so that's the other thing about it, is that, you know, and we're sort of getting to the end of the loop, but you're a person, right? This isn't like I just started doing this a month ago. You've been fighting this fight for a long time.
My entire existence, actually.
So
thank you.
You want to close with a quick message to people who are like, they feel weary because they feel like nothing's changing?
Oh, yeah, I do. Girl, same. I feel the exact same way. I see the fight. I'm just going to admit it. I see the fight we've been fighting. I see the fight that our grandparents fought. I see the evolution of the change that's happening and the acceleration of it, because I'm looking at it in front of me with my own daughter. And that's just what we have to remember, is that it's not for us. It's never been for us. It's always been about our kids. It's been about ending the toxic cycles of violence when it comes to our children and how we react, and just remembering that the future is now, and he who controls education controls the future.
Absolutely.
That's an awesome close. Thank you very much, Mercedes Damerkowski. We really appreciate you being here from Nebraska, joining us on People for Liberty's Pot O Gold. So just for everybody who's putting into the comment, yes, I know my green screen is showing. I've had complete camera failure here, and so I'm on via my phone. Always good to have a backup ready to go, but the phone doesn't do the green screen. But that's okay. because I want to be completely transparent about everything that's happening. And one of the things that hasn't been transparent for people in dealing with prohibition is the way the legal system has actually been biased against people getting better. And we have our next guest, Princess. Did you write an introduction?
You're already on a roll, Dan.
Well, all right. This for many people, this is a man who needs no introduction. In
Absolutely.
addition to being Gary Johnson's running mate in 2012, Judge Jim Gray is the author of several books. But the thing that for me is most important to talking about the significance that he's had in our community is that he was in the system. He was a judge who got to see the people that came before the courts and how well the court was able to deal with that stuff. So let me introduce, Judge Jim Gray. Judge Gray, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Certainly a pleasure. Certainly a pleasure. Actually, it's just payback time, Dan, because you were on my show, All Rise the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray, about a little less than a year ago, and you were wonderful. But I hope I can live up to your standards.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. It was actually one of the last. I actually was at another convention and stepped aside, and I'll remember it because it was the last public event I did before COVID really shut everything down. But that's another thing to talk about is that, you also had that radio show on Sirius that went out nationwide. There's a podcast available and stuff like that. You're not a person who, when you retired, you said, you know what, now I'm ready for the beach. Even though you live in California and there's plenty of beaches around there, you kept fighting this fight. What is it about it that's so important that calls to you that says, I have to keep going?
Dan, I love my country. I think that we are and should be an inspirational country, and we have been. I'm actually on doing a podcast now. We're taping. It's called Becoming America. America is a perfect idea. The United States of America is a work in progress, and I believe that. I think we're better today than we were 10 years ago or 20 or 30. I'm a little concerned that we're going to be better 10 years from now because of the victimization society that we're in and the overspending and the rest of that. But what are you going to do? Quit? I care about my children. I care about my country. And you just do what you can.
You raise an excellent point that you're right. What are you going to do? Quit? None of us can. And we're all called to this. And, Princess, you're a person who, too, you are at the opposite end of the age spectrum from me and Judge Gray.
You're being so diplomatic.
Well, opposite. But
we call them senior status.
But you also feel called to this, right, Princess?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Who are you asking?
Sorry, I was just going to go to Princess to talk about being called to it from a younger side, because we have the perspective, and then I'll come back to Judge Gray talking about it. So, Princess, just talk about your being called to it. Can I reveal you are 23 years old?
I'm 22, Dan. But yeah, as a 22-year-old, I think going through school and reading your government-sanctioned textbooks that describe the way America was and is going to be, and then you step into the world and find out that rent is astronomically high, and you have to take out student loans that you can't afford, and the job market sucks, and no one's letting you do anything, and it's your first summer being a real adult, and then they tell you have to stay inside, and it's just like a compound effect of the America that everyone talks about being so great. People got to live, but I only got to read about, and everything seems downhill from now. If we look at global warming, they're telling us we have 4 years to fix our planet or we're all going to die. And our national debt is $28 trillion. And think about what we're stacked up against. And we always say that the younger generations are the ones to have the revolution, but what choice do the younger generations have? Look at the shithole you just given us.
Well, you raise a fascinating point, and let me come back to Judge Gray, sort of tie these things together in that, we're looking at a very interesting time for our legal system, because there's been such an expansion of powers, whether it's, through the various health mandates or other things, that we are seeing a judicial system that was already burdened, now faced with more stuff. And it would be the easiest thing in the world to remove a lot of these drug cases from the court, right?
Well, certainly. Dan, you're probably aware of this. My background, as soon as I got out of the law school, I was a Navy JAG attorney, criminal defense attorney, and then I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, in private sector for about 5 years, and then was appointed a judge at the end of 1983. It really hit me between the eyes that the biggest unmet issue in the court system was alcohol-related offenses. You know, we'd slap them on the wrist, take their money, and say, don't do it again. But if you're an alcoholic, you're addicted to alcohol, you're most likely to go out, drive again after drinking, and hurt somebody. So I put in the first drug court in the country, as far as I know, within 6 months of my appointment. June of 1984, we had an alcohol-related drug court going. And the difference is that I was a Republican back then in name, but I was still a Libertarian, I believe in responsibility of all things. I'm in the responsibility business, and a judge really, if you think about it, is almost an ultimate social worker. You know, we have the ability to put people where they do not want to go, and we can start getting people to understand responsibility. So I put this in and would take people that had offended. If you were going to drink again while you're on my program, I'd put you in jail. Or I'd say you're not a good candidate for probation, so I'll put you in jail for 90 days, suspend your license for 6 months, and you're rid of me. Is that what you choose? Or do you want to come back on the program? Of course, you'd weight it so that they would want to come back on the program. But the thing, Libertarian or otherwise, the thing, it makes as much sense to me to put that gifted actor Robert Downey Jr. in jail for his heroin problem, and he's been heroin problems for a long time. He's making good movies now, but he'll have to be careful. He'll always pretty much have that craving. But it makes as much sense to me to put him in jail for his heroin problem as it would have Betty Ford in jail for her alcohol problem. It's the same thing. It's a medical issue. Bring them closer to medical professionals. They have no business being in the criminal justice system at all, unless if they drive a motor vehicle under the influence of, you name it, alcohol, which is my drug of choice, or marijuana or methamphetamine or whatever, that's a crime. What's the difference? And the difference is now you are putting our safety at risk. That's a legitimate criminal justice issue. But it makes as much sense for the government, in my opinion, to control what I as an adult put into my body as it does what I put into my mind. It's none of their business. So let's stop this hideous prohibition of drugs and just hold people accountable for their actions. So I've been trying to do that. We Libertarians have been trying to do that now for decades. It's our issue. And finally, we're making some progress.
You raise an astonishing point, because sometimes people don't think about the fact that, you know, the idea of there are already plenty of laws around driving. Okay. And driving while under the influence, driving while you're not paying attention, driving while you're dangerous is illegal regardless of what the cause is. And as a person who, like, I spent a lot of time recently holding signs for political candidates on the side of the road, there's no question in my mind, the most dangerous habit that's happening right now is texting while driving. All the time, I would see people while they were driving towards me and be petrified about it. And there's some laws coming online about that, but nobody wants to say, oh, you know what, if you're texting while driving, we're going to come up with a solution that involves you staying in jail, losing your job, being separated from your kids, any of that stuff. And so there is this difference, even though the crime itself, right, the dangerous driving is the same thing. So this idea of treating drug addiction as a medical issue, that makes a lot of sense. But there's also probably, you know, an idea to say some of the stuff that's happening, some of the drugs that have been prohibited, we could get rid of the prohibition and just deal with the violent consequences, and we'd be in a better place, right?
Well, yes. And there's a wonderful saying, it wasn't mine, but I quote it. We should reserve our prison space for people that we're afraid of, not people we're mad at. And that goes a long way. You know, we over incarcerate in our country. Back in the Richard Nixon time, and I know you're too young to remember all of this, but
I remember Nixon.
Well, okay, regretfully, but you know, he was able to take a political slogan, tough on crime, and turned it into a social policy. And we're still doing that. The United States of America has 5% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners. And there was a Democratic U.S. Senator named Jim Webb from Virginia who said, taking those statistics, look, either we're the most criminally oriented people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? And it's clear. Yes, the prison industrial complex has a great deal of power. In California, the Prison Guards Union is the strongest political lobby group there. So yes, they have money, but we have to work on things that work. What works? I can tell you. In fact, there's a wonderful group here. I had her on my radio show also, All Rise, but she has something called Open Gate International, and it takes people that have been in drug rehab, women that have been sexually trafficked, or people that are just released from prison, and they teach them skills in culinary arts. They teach them to be a chef, and they're fortunate enough they have a 12-week program, don't charge any money for it, they're philanthropic, but 3/4 of those people have jobs when they get out. And I thought, wow, that's a fabulous thing. So what did I do? I took the 2 heads of Open Gate International to Norco State Prison here in California and introduced them to the warden, who loved the idea. Now they're going to put this program inside the prison. So why wait for them to get out? When they get out, they can have a job. If they have a job, they're about 1/10 of a chance of being a recidivist than they are if they don't have a job. What does somebody that's drug addicted, for example, in prison do? Doesn't get any drug treatment when they're there. They come out, they're still drug addicted. They can't get a job. In many ways, the stupid government prohibits them from getting licenses because they're ex-felons, so they can't get a job. What does somebody drug addicted that gets depressed do? Goes back and uses drugs. People in Norco prison have an 85% recidivism rate within a year. They might as well not have come out in the first place. Attack what works. What works. You know, community policing. When I was a child, a lot earlier than when you were, I had it drummed into me. Jimmy, if you get lost, what will you do? Answer, I will find a policeman. He's my friend. Do you think any parents teach their children that anymore? No, a lot because of the war on drugs. But police officers are wonderful social workers, and so are district attorneys. So I talk to district attorneys with some frequency, either in groups or individually, and I look at them and say, you have a mandate. You have an absolutely impressive, important mandate to do the right thing for the right reason every time. You speak for us and you do the right thing for the right reason every time. Same thing with a police officer. Now, they have difficult decisions sometimes, but I tell you, officer, man or woman, if you try to do the right thing for the right reason, we've got your back. We will take care of you. We understand sometimes you make mistakes, but if you stray, if you abuse people unnecessarily, if you involve yourself with overreactions, you're supposed to be taught, you're supposed to be professional, we will hold you responsible. No, none of this qualified immunity stuff. That's an atrocity in itself from my standpoint. Body cameras. What's going to happen if police wear body cameras? 2 things, both good. The policemen will know that they're being filmed, so they'll act better. And the members of the public will know they're being filmed. They'll act better too. We'll reduce the temperature if you have that accountability. We're in the accountability business and we've gotten away from it, and that's a problem.
And you know, the idea that the role and the perception of a police officer in public has changed is a critical one, because I remember a day, you're in California, people, and a little bit before my time, but the television show Dragnet, which was about police officers in Los Angeles, and they call themselves peace officers. It was such an important phrasing because their job was to keep the peace, as opposed to nowadays we refer to them as law enforcement officers. And those are 2 different, very different things. There's an argument that says, fire departments don't drive around investigating people's houses to see, is there something in here that might cause a fire? So when there's a fire, they respond to it. They make sure that, the community is fire free. Peace officers, who are designed to keep peace, have a really important job, because that idea that we're supposed to be, a society that we can deal with each other peacefully, it's critical to maintaining our democracy. But the idea that somebody's looking for any little rule that could be broken and say, okay, we are going to enforce this law, it reminds me of the critical thing you talked about, how important how powerful the prison workers union is in the state of California. Do they have an official position on legalizing cannabis?
Yes, they hate the idea. It's the killer weed, of course.
Right. And it stops them from having so many people in prison as well.
Oh, you think someone would take away my liberty so that they could have more financial security? Oh, please, Dan. Well, actually, of course, you're right. You know, it's an atrocity. It's literally an atrocity to take away someone's liberty so I can have more financial security. That's simply flat out wrong. But we have done that. We are doing that. I also interviewed, and Dan, and Princess, I cannot get this out of my mind. On my radio show, All Rise, I interviewed a fellow by the name of Justin Brooks, who is the director of the Innocence Project in San Diego. He's been doing it for 20 years. He's an attorney. And he told me, my jaw still hasn't quite come back into normal. He told me that in his 20 years, he himself has walked 29 people out of state prison who were found to be factually innocent. Now, how can that happen? I hope you would agree with me. We have one person today in our custody nationwide who is factually innocent. That's too many. He did 29. How can this happen? Well, you know, you have some people that will be a jailhouse snitch, for example, and say, oh, you know, I was in the cell next to Dan Fishman, and he acknowledged that he had robbed that bank or whatever else. So he works himself a deal so he gets a lighter sentence by lying against you. And if you know that, and you have other people outside that, you know, you don't have an alibi or whatever, you're offered a prison sentence of, say, 2 years if you plead guilty, or if you go to trial, you'll get 30 years, you know, and you know that snitch is going to testify. I had one guy who I talked to recently. I've become a pen pal with a couple of prisoners for various reasons. And he was a medical doctor. He was convicted of overprescribing drugs. He's now in federal prison. And he said, he was offered 2 years in jail, in prison, if he would in fact plead guilty to it. Plus they were going to prosecute his wife. And he said, I wasn't guilty. I'm innocent. I didn't do it. He went to trial and was convicted. He's now serving 30 years in prison, and he's 60 years old. You know, it's such an awesome amount of power that a prosecutor has. I was one, and I tried to do it reasonably and fairly. But think of it this way. Prosecutors can do more for people than defense attorneys can. How is that? You know, if somebody should not be prosecuted, a prosecutor can keep that from happening. A defense attorney not. If they should be prosecuted maybe for a misdemeanor instead of a felony that holds a 3 strikes and you're out or whatever, prosecutors can do that. You don't show how tough you are. You are a representative of the people. Accountability, yes, but you don't over prosecute. And people that prosecute politically are the dregs of society, and that happens quite a bit.
You know, you raise an outstanding point, because one of the things that we're seeing, especially in drug cases, because there are all these extra penalties that are now attached to drug cases involving civil asset forfeiture, that sometimes people will be offered a deal saying, well, you know what? If you plead guilty to this, we'll let your family keep your car, which we could seize. All these sort of extortion tactics that are just, you know, terrible. It's not what it makes a mockery of using the word justice to describe the system.
I wrote a book on judging, Dan, and it's called Wearing the Robe, the Art and Responsibilities of Judging in Today's Courts, trying to pass along insights into the justice system. But the first sentence in the introduction was, the best decision I ever made in my life was choosing my parents. And of course, I had nothing to do with that choice, but I was blessed to be born into such a wonderful, supportive family. But I think that's given me an obligation morally to help those that did not choose quite so well. That I've been blessed, and to be able to pass that along is really an important thing. Plus, to help people resolve their disputes, and that's not in the criminal justice system, but I tell you, you can get people's attention, and you can. When I was on a formal probation violation calendar, I would get reports from the probation department as to how well they were doing, and if you got 3 stars out of 5, that meant you're kind of treading water. If you got 4 stars, that meant you were really taking it seriously for yourself. And if you got 5 stars, you would actually help your Confederates, also your colleagues. And I had a practice that anytime someone came in with 5 stars, I would call them up first. I would mention all of this, get off the bench and shake their hand and congratulate them. And I literally had 2 young men, I'd say they're in their 20s at different times. When I did that, they broke down in tears and said, Your Honor, you are the first man who has ever congratulated me in my life for anything. what's going on here? This is what works. And if I had to send people back to jail, which I did for short periods of time, I'd also call them up first so others could see what was going to happen. And I'd say, look, I know you can do better. I know that you violated probation, you did whatever, but I know you can do better, George. I've seen you, and I know you can do better. And they would. That you would give them that confidence, that pat on the back or the slap on the wrist, but you would do it from a human standpoint. And when you get out of the human standpoint, that's where you really start failing. People are important. I write a column. You've probably seen it, 2 paragraphs for liberty. And if you're interested, go to judgejimgray.com and let me know, and I put you on my list. But I'm writing one on Alexis de Tocqueville. It'll come out on Monday. And I got 3 quotes from him. If you don't mind, I'd like to read them. The first is, when the public discovers that they can vote themselves money from the public treasury, the American experiment will be over. That's where we are today with regard to this $1.9 trillion so-called bailout, which is just basically giving their cohorts some money. A second one was, the democratic tendency leads men unceasingly to multiply the privileges of the state and to circumscribe the rights of the private person. That's what happens. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said the most bad government comes from too much government. And the third one is, no citizen is so obscure that it is not very dangerous to allow him to be oppressed. You oppress one person, you're oppressing us all. We're obligated to treat people as individuals and to treat them fairly and openly and transparently. And boy, we're getting away from that. Dan, you should work harder. We need more libertarians out there.
It's funny you say that, because so we're going to go a little bit off topic here, but there was an amazing article in the Atlantic, came out yesterday, about de Tocqueville. And one of the things that he wrote was that the reason why democracy is so different in America than it was in France, and everybody hasn't read de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, please do so. One of the really amazing books. But he talked about the fact that Americans at the time practiced democracy at the local level all the time, that people were actively involved. And especially when we look at what's happening in terms of prohibition and the enforcement, we have moved away from that. People are no longer at the local level involved in the laws, but we're starting to see a change in that. We're starting to see cities and local municipalities say, we want to change the way prohibition is enforced. And that's starting to work. And go ahead.
It's just true. I wrote a musical. It's called Convention, The Birth of America. It's about the Constitutional Convention. And I did some research, and I found out that the 55 delegates to the convention, 1787, they bickered, they debated, they fought about virtually everything. But Dan, Princess, the thing that they agreed upon was the most important function of government was securing our liberties from the encroachment of government. I'll even say it again. The most important function of government was safeguarding our liberties from the encroachment of government. How far have we gotten away from that now? Our liberty is what makes us different, makes us unique, and makes us special. And I think our founding fathers would be extremely upset with the way we have allowed us to get away from these liberties.
That is 100%. I couldn't agree with that anymore. I am very passionate. Princess, did you have anything else you wanted to add on to this? You're muted. Drink.
I'm out. I'm out of liquor, guys.
That's all right.
Never happened.
By the way, I just saw a picture of Ryan Jenkins, who's a friend of mine from, Kentucky. So hi, Ryan.
So I'm a paralegal by trade. I wanted to be an attorney, and I wanted to be the district attorney in Manhattan, and I got a tattoo of the skyline because the attorney has more power than anybody because they get to decide who's going to jail. And you've just really inspired me to pursue that, because that's the best way to help people.
It really is. Bless you. And if I can help, let me know. Get a copy of my book, Wearing the Robe. There's a lot of insights in there as to what attorneys do, judges do, and the rest.
Wearing the robe?
Yes. I did everything I could to, just as I was retiring, my wife said, well, you ought to write a book, and because you've learned so much, you ought to share. So judgejimgray.com, and you can see it there.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Judge Jim Gray, thank you again for your service. Thanks for being on our broadcast, Pot of Gold, as we talk about prohibition and the tricky path that America is walking as we're
May
getting
I,
a little bit.
may I leave
Please
you
do.
with, may I leave you by asking if I can share what I think the best play on words is that I've ever heard? Talk about being off subject, but
Of course.
the correct answer is yes. Okay. So what do you get when you mix an elephant and a rhinoceros? Of course,
I know
obviously
it.
that's a superseding importance. What do you get when you mix an elephant and a rhinoceros? And the answer is
An
albino.
elephino.
That's right. Good for you. Got to have some fun in this world.
That's
We
funny.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Princess.
Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you again soon. Well, we've done it. We crossed some technical difficulties. My green screen is still showing in the background, but I'm on the air. I thought that was an amazing broadcast.
Yeah, Dan, you really pulled it together. I want to thank People for Liberty for owning this and making it a reality. This was so much fun, especially for like St. Patrick's Day. We have to do something special. But now 420 is next month, so I don't know how we're going to top this, but I think it's possible.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because for me, talking about prohibition and stuff like that, we had some happy and we had some sad in here together.
Yeah.
420 for me, that's a celebration. I mean, it's the happiness part of it, and we can't stick our head in the sand. We can't pretend that just because we're saying, oh, we got some legalities anywhere, that marijuana is easier to get, stuff like that, that everything's been fixed, because everything hasn't been fixed yet. But looking at where we are now, the dedication of the people who are fighting cause. I mean, when we talk about Jim Gray, right, a guy of that prestige, getting it, preaching it, talking about the difference that it makes. And it's something that I never had really thought about the importance of the role in the district attorney. Like a lot of times I think about the role of the district attorney, like, the worst one in recent memory for me was in Ferguson, where the district attorney decided not to prosecute the police officer who had been involved in the shooting there. But there is also a lot of discretion on the other side, or a good district attorney can really make a difference. My uncle, who was most influential man in my life other than my dad, was ADA in Manhattan. And it's funny that you talked about that, because he talked specifically about a lot of the cases that he just wouldn't prosecute. And there was I'll end on a legal joke. He was prosecuting a case at the time where he'd gone both. So he'd start off in the prosecutor's office. He actually ended up moving into the public defender's office for a while, just because he was so appalled at where things were going. And there was a case where the defense was entrapment, that the police had essentially set up a trap for this guy to break the law. And he was working, this is when he was working as the ADA, and the defense attorney said, ladies and gentlemen, this is entrapment. Just like in the Garden of Eden. If the snake doesn't come along, if the apple's not there, Eve doesn't commit that crime. She goes on about her life. There is no thing. And in our system of jurisprudence, the police are not allowed to do that. They are not allowed to entrap you into committing a crime. And my uncle, who was a DA at the time, said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, did God buy that argument? No, he did not. And neither will you. And it's a funny thing, because entrapment is a really serious thing, and I don't want to minimize it, but I always remember that line about it.
That's perfect, like full circle for prohibition, because we started with Adam and Eve and we're ending with it too. Like that was, did you plan that? Because that was amazing.
I didn't plan it. It's just the way it worked out. But yeah,
You're
Adam
a
and Eve is the origin
wow.
story. It's the origin story. We are the People for Liberty. And it's not just a name. It's me. It's Princess. Some of the people here, it's all of us combined with the idea that it can't be one person when we're arguing for liberty, because liberty isn't about one person. Liberty is about all of us. My name is Dan. I'm on with Princess. Peopleforliberty.org is where you can find out more about us. Thank you so much for a wonderful show.